Rock and roll? It's 7:01.
When he walks in 30 seconds, we're gonna tell him it was Lori's choice.
Everybody just do this. Just kidding. Don't do that.
Just hurry up and do roll call.
Yeah, very quickly. The meeting will come to order. Welcome everybody that's here, mostly all staff it looks like, and cabinet members, all the most important people to the district. I'm sure there might be a parent hiding under a mask out there, but we'll see soon. Roll call, please.
Ader,
Here.
Anarino, Hunt,
Here.
Khan,
Here.
Smolka,
Here.
Shupai,
Here.
Wong.
Here.
All right. The mission of School District 15 is to produce world-class learners by building a connected learning community. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are going to start today with a public hearing on the adoption of the fiscal year 2021 tentative budget. May I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to open the public hearing on the adoption of the fiscal year 2021 tentative budget.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Good
Ms.
evening.
McCluskey?
Good evening. I'd like to take this opportunity just to introduce myself. I'm Diana McCluskey. I'm the new CSBO for the district. And prior to this, Mike Adamczyk, he retired on July 1st. This is Josh Shute. He's also the Director of Fiscal Services, and we both started on July 1st. And we're very happy to be here tonight.
Welcome.
So tonight is the public hearing on the adoption of the fiscal year 21 tentative budget. There have been no changes to the tentative budget. It is the same tentative budget that Mike and Corey presented back in June. In your packet, you did, there was a detail sheet of account numbers and dollar amounts that will be incorporated into the final budget in September. So we are well ahead of the planning for that. And there will be more changes between now and then. But in particular, I am adding into Fund 20 and Fund 10 account numbers, and we'll be budgeting for extra COVID expenses. But again, that will be on the final budget. So tonight, again, is just the tentative budget. And I think that's really all that needs to be said about it. You were here for the presentation in June.
Beautiful. Does anybody have questions?
I just really quickly, and I apologize for not sending this prior to. Do we have any expectation that there's going to be any sort of dip in funds from tax dollars due to COVID with people not working? Has there been any actuarial tables or anything run like that statewide at this point?
Now, through ISBE, there really hasn't been any real announcements. We're watching. Josh can probably speak to the property taxes that have come in this month. Do you want to mention anything about the property taxes?
At this point, it looks like the property tax is in line with last year. We've been getting a number of larger payments. This past month, the last one we got was $11 million. So at this point, it's too early to tell what's going to happen for sure, but we will track it on a regular basis and make sure that we're comparing it with prior year and expectations of what we think it should be.
Okay, great, thank you.
You know, the deadline is technically October 1st without penalty and interest. So I'm anticipating that, we may see a little bit lower compared to last year, but by October, we're hoping that we'll still see similar tax revenues as last year. in the final budget, the CPPRT will be lower.
Okay,
So, but we'll talk about more of that next month.
okay, great, thank you.
All right, we will now open the meeting up for public comment. Can everybody hear me okay? Wearing this without wear? Okay. Please remember that this is not a dialogue between you and the board. If you have a specific issue which requires a response, Superintendent Hines will get back to you. Please state your name, identify any group that you represent, and limit your remarks to no more than 5 minutes. If someone previously has articulated something with which you agree, please state that you agree rather than reiterating the entire comment. Finally, avoid comments specific to any person, student, or staff member, respecting that person's right to privacy. This is not the forum to comment on personnel issues. Is there anybody that would like to speak? All right. We'll move on.
Took it easy on you for your first one.
I know. Thank you.
You guys did a great job for the first time up there. Minimal shaking. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Make a motion to adjourn the public hearing on the adoption of the fiscal year 2021 tentative budget.
Second.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving into the next public hearing, this one's specifically about the interfund transfer. May I have a motion to open, please?
Make a motion to open the public hearing on the interfund transfer.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Presentation, please.
Okay, again, this is something that you've done in the past. It is a requirement of the Illinois School Code to hold a hearing if the district, and this district does fit within the parameters that it is required, to have, if you are going to transfer money from Ed Fund, the Education Fund, to the Operation and Maintenance Fund. And so there will be a resolution later in the meeting. We are transferring $2.5 million from the Ed Fund to the O&M. Later this year, we will then transfer $6.5 from O&M to capital funds in order to cover the $9.9 million of capital projects that will be budgeted in the capital funds. So that is basically the background of what this hearing is about, and later the resolution that you will be asked to pass.
Wonderful, thank you. So before I go through all of the public hearing information that I just went through, is there anyone that would like to speak about the interfund transfer? If there are no public comments, we will move on. May I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing, please?
I make a motion to adjourn the public hearing on the interfund transfer.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Dr. Hines?
Okay. So it feels like it's been a while since we've been together, even though it's only been a month, but it's been a busy month. I can't think of a month that wasn't busy since I've gotten here, but this one seems exceptionally busy from our last meeting to this meeting. I'll just share a few highlights in terms of what we've been up to for the last month. So one of the things I'll talk about tonight will be modifications and updates and kind of the ongoing work and development of our Return to Learn plan. Like every district in Illinois and across the country, each day we work to refine the plan more and more and respond to feedback and to those shifts to really put forth the most comprehensive plan that we can with the hopes of being able to return to in-person instruction for the 8,000 students that wanted to do so and the 4,000 that will stay home for all or a portion of the year. In terms of construction, you're sitting in one of 6 construction projects in terms of secure vestibules and some office enhancements. The team has really pushed to get to this point so we could have our board meeting live here in August, and they will be turning the building back over to members of the staff at Walter R. Sunling here on Friday. All other projects are really moving forward and are on time. We are under budget. We have not used all of our contingency funds, and we're really excited about that. Nicholas has been a great addition to, to help manage all of these projects, especially as Jim and Andy join our team, as the two new leaders within the facility and maintenance department. They've really, as I was telling Lisa earlier, hit the ground absolutely running. So we made good hiring decisions both with Diana and Josh so far, and Andy and Jim. They understand hard work and so far are able to keep pace with the many things we have going on in such a large district, especially then during a pandemic. That adds a whole other layer. So HVAC projects are done. Marion Jordan's flooring project is underway. It looks really sharp, but things are coming together. Very excited for staff to return to see all of the work. They're gonna, I think, even though we're nervous to come back, I think they're all very excited to see the construction projects. The custodial and maintenance staffs have been working very hard, and the buildings are really ready to welcome staff and students back, when we can do so. So the buildings, I don't think have really and truly ever looked better. The finance and facilities department, as I've said, you met Diana and Josh. They've been really doing a heck of a job. It's hard to start in a new district, and within a month you have your budget hearing. And to get your head around such a large budget in and of itself is a task, but to really be ready to have a budget hearing, and then in another month, to be ready to really present any changes and reactions and pivots that we've had to make, is really a pretty comprehensive task. Layer COVID again on top of that, and you're going to hear that probably all year. COVID takes it to a whole nother level, because we will talk to you in September. We've spent that $1.6 million in CARES Act dollars, but we're spending additional monies, and Josh and Diana, although when hired, told us they were penny pinchers, which is part of the reason they were hired. They're actually finding money so we can hire the staff that we need, because there are just so many additional expenses and needs in COVID. So they're working well. They've slipped right into the weekly construction meetings, and we're moving and grooving. We had a call with Elizabeth. She'll talk in a little bit, but our Moody rating came in, our AA2 rating. We had a nice couple conversations, and we'll present that information to you. We also had another meeting with RSP. That is the group that's doing our capacity study. We have invited them tentatively to come to the September meeting, and I know Lisa and I, when we spoke a few weeks ago, we said September or October, but we really just didn't want to do it in August, because we are so very focused on how we are going to start the year, that we decided to table that. And I know there's at least one person in the community that's very concerned that we haven't talked about capacity, but I hope everybody understands that that is still an absolute priority, but nothing is a greater priority than safely opening our schools. So the board can let me know at this point in time if they'd like them to come in September, or if we'd like them to come in October. There are some travel restrictions, coming into Chicago and at the corporate level of RSP, so more than likely they will join us virtually, so we have to figure out what that will look like, because I don't think members of the RSP team can travel here to Illinois. But would you like September or October? Do you have a preference?
Probably September.
Yeah, I think September
As long
would
as
be
it
good.
works.
Okay, so we'll make sure to schedule September. We have been working again at the building level, not only to do construction projects and to get the building kind of in top shape. We have been removing furniture to allow for the greatest amount of physical distancing in our classrooms. Our numbers are looking at the elementary level to be classrooms of 13, 14, all the way up to maybe 19 or 20. We're trying to get those 20s kind of down to no more than 19, and in many cases we're being successful. So we're trying to allow for the greatest amount of distancing, more than 3 feet, but we're going to be anywhere between probably 4 and 6 in most of our classrooms. So that the custodial staff has really been working. Andy and Jim have been working to find desks to replace tables, because we think it's just easier for kids to keep track of their own space, and it just provides a real definitive, like, this is my space, that's your space. Adults can separate and stay separated, little kids not so much, they're like magnets. So they've been helping us find desks. And somebody I know had asked about student fees. We received one email about student fees, and 211, unbeknownst to us, decided not to collect fees. And I know I talked to President Shupai about student fees, and you had asked for me to find out what value, what do we gain in terms of our fees, and it's around $800,000 annually. So it's a fairly significant sum of money. We do have a process for families that are receiving free or reduced lunch or can't afford it to either have their fees waived or to have them reduced. And I would say that was, when I talked to Diana, our recommendation for anybody that's experiencing a hardship to go through that waiver process. Otherwise, we would like to, we've pushed out the fees. We're spending more money in COVID, not less. Everybody's wondering if kids are home, you know, are we paying fees? Well, everybody received a Chromebook. That's way more than the fees that we collect. They are still going to receive their other materials. We will be distributing Chromebooks with readers' notebooks, math workbooks, and other consumables. So we're still spending money on supplies, regardless of if we're home or or in a combination of home and in school.
I think it's also worth saying, Lori, you know, I think any of us haven't gone through the packet, but for the public that hasn't, there are a number of expenditures in the packet this month that are things we would not have been spending money on if it wasn't for COVID, like the SEL programming that Tom had in the packet. Then there were a number of other things. There's some curricular investments and things that are impactful but are very particularly invested in because of distance learning. So I am with you. You know, fees, our costs are not going down, they are going up. And we do have that process in place, and the process can be found very easily on the website. The person that originally had brought it up was happy just to know that that was the case. So if we PR that and make sure people know.
All right, in terms of curriculum and professional development, that department is always extremely busy in the summer. We do a lot of summer writing. Teacher committees come in and work extensively to be ready for any curricular changes or rollouts and pilots, so that has been taking place. A lot of activity this summer, certainly building our virtual learning classrooms and figuring out how to make our current curriculum able to be accessed by staff and students while we're remote, whether it's just for those 3 weeks or while we do the roll-in, or if we have to go back into remote at any point, if we change from phase 4 to a lesser phase. So a lot of great work coming out of curriculum and the professional development team. We're getting ready for 4 very big days ahead. We launch our Institute Day kickoff is tomorrow, and it will be a combination of teachers in their classrooms or teachers working with their teams and virtual lessons or virtual learning experiences. That'll be Wednesday. Thursday, we will have an opportunity for teachers to learn about how to be digital teachers, how to teach virtually, how to use the platforms and use digital resources. There's a lot of information that Janice will talk about when we get to that slide presentation. Then Friday, it will be another Institute Day, which is a combination of district and building topics. And then the following week, so that'll be Monday, then Tuesday, we'll go to another e-learning plan day. So everybody has 2 very rich days of learning how to teach differently and more deeply than we were able to do in the spring when it was such an emergency that we closed school and we had to really pivot our whole delivery model. It's gonna look and feel very different. And then our teachers will have 1 day of teacher plan. In the calendar, multiple times a year, they have teacher plan days. We had to move the November election day that we had scheduled as a teacher plan day. We had to move it because we're no longer through omnibus legislation allowed to be in schools, even just teachers, on election days. So we quickly captured that day to allow the teachers to apply everything that they were learning and get ready to welcome students the following day. You'll hear from Lisa Nuss just how intense she has had to work, and a number of people in her department. 2 new hires there, Lori and Phil, again, hit the ground with their running shoes on in terms of the staffing implications. We had to hire more staff. We had to work through accommodations and whatnot. Some of our staff are going to be working from home. It's been just a very busy time in that department. We've had several sessions of administrative boot camps, so we have a lot of new assistant principals that went through some extensive onboarding. We had a very tremendous new teacher orientation, again live across 4 different locations at Winston, so everybody could be distanced. But we really provided a wealth of information and support to our new hires. Additionally, we've been working to collect, clean up, and redistribute Chromebooks. We have a plan that will start on the 17th for families to get their new devices, as well as any materials, physical materials that they're going to need that are not just delivered through a Chromebook. That will be happening on August 17th, and it'll probably happen over a number of days, so everybody has the resources that they need for the first day of school. Partnership work continues. I still am a member of the POC Executive Board. We had a meeting this year to kind of plan out the year and how to continue to push support into the community during these very challenging times. We had a very successful supply donation drive for PATH, and we will be doing another cleaning supply drive because we had such a successful drive, it was a few months ago, and we received word from the community partners that all of our families have depleted those supplies, so we want to make sure that we get supplies in their hands again as quickly as possible. And I think we're looking towards the end of August to do that, to do another drive, and hopefully it will be as successful. A few other things, our next board meeting is September 9th, right here. And the last thing that I think is worth mentioning is the rolling, the re-entry, the dates. So everybody will be remote through Labor Day. Then we will start with a rolling re-entry if conditions allow for us to really bring kids in slowly and to get everybody used to the returning to school after being gone from school for 5 months. Allow us to operationalize all of the plans and safety measures that we've put in place, assess our students, and just get everybody back acclimated. We'll start with our youngest learners, transition then in special education, more of our self-contained or more intensive programs, our transitional bilingual programs, and both SPED and transitional bilinguals have legal requirements for us to deliver those services, the integration services, and we just know that they're better delivered in person. So we have really prioritized our youngest learners and then our specialty groups as the guidance suggests, and then we've layered in 2 grade level bands at a time. The guidance does say special ed, EL, and children under the age of 13. So that does identify our whole population. So we'll see how that works, but that is our plan at this time, and that is my report in terms of my monthly update.
Big one. Anybody have any questions or comments? I think it goes without saying, we all know there's a tremendous amount of activity happening and a lot of success out there in a really trying time. So thank you all for what you're doing to make it possible for us to move forward right now.
Okay. Moving on, I will deliver some of this address, and then members of the team that have been deeply involved in different portions of this work will come on up and deliver their portion, and then we'll probably take questions a section at a time while they're here, and then we'll transition to another staff member. They'll deliver any updates or information, ask questions. That'll eliminate some of the back and forth. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay. So in July, we convened the board at a committee of the whole, which was a meeting that was not previously scheduled when we set that board calendar a year ago. But because of everything that was happening with COVID, we made sure the board came together. And just a few weeks after we received guidance from the Illinois State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health, it was roughly 2 weeks, we presented the board with a tentative plan. And just like anything that's tentative, we intended to be open and flexible and willing to shift as either new information came our way, we had more time to plan, to read research, or to respond to feedback from staff or the community. So a few of the things we'll talk about today are some of the shifts that we've made to that plan that was presented to the board in draft form in July. So just to keep kind of going back to this, these points have not changed since the end of June guidance that came up. We are still in phase 4 of the guidance through Restore Illinois, which will require use of personal protective PPE face coverings for all staff. Okay? Prohibiting more than 50 individuals from gathering in one space, and we've done that here through physically distancing. Requiring social distancing be observed as much as possible. So again, there's not a 6-foot requirement. It's to the extent possible. When we're working in our offices, we definitely try to find that 6 feet. And again, as I said, we're working to create as much distance in each of the classrooms as possible through the opt-out and through some of the work that we're doing with furniture and classroom design. Requiring that schools conduct symptom screening and temperature checks or require that individuals self-certify. That is a requirement, and we'll talk about how we've changed our plan there in just a few moments. and requiring an increase in school-wide cleaning and disinfection. That had already been, was well underway prior to the school closures, and we've only increased those protocols since the school started. And all public and non-public schools in Illinois serving pre-kindergarten through 12th grade students must follow these guidelines. Okay? All right, so pending questions. So if you go to the next one, great. And I'll just read it because I know it's kind of hard for the camera to see. I know it's a bit hard to hear with the mask, but I'll try to move my mic. So all individuals in school buildings, including all public and non-public schools that serve students in pre-kindergarten through grade 12, must wear face coverings at all times unless they are younger than 2 years of age, have trouble breathing, or are unconscious, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove the cover without assistance. Okay, we have had our the mandate reviewed by Hodges and Louise, our firm. We are updating a board policy and parent-student handbook language to include the mandatory wearing of face coverings. Violations will be handled in a manner just the way all discipline is addressed. It will be progressive, but it is the expectation that everybody will wear their face coverings in the classroom. And violations of policy may lead to expulsion, to an expulsion hearing to remove students from in-person instruction. We certainly hope we don't have to get to that level, but you know, we take the guidance seriously. We intend to reinforce the guidance, and we want our teachers want the guidance to be adhered to because that helps them to feel safe in classrooms with children. We are really working. We've had, I think some of you have been copied on a few letters from people that you know, don't really believe that we should have to wear masks. We are trying to reach out to those folks directly to see, and I know Ann Scully, you know, can speak to this. Some of her families, because our students with special education IEPs or special needs, you know, are going to have a hard time wearing masks, so they're doing it again on a case-by-case basis, trying to figure out what modifications or accommodations we could put in place. Could we do a shield? Is there a certain kind of mask? Do we need to take more frequent mask breaks? Can the families help us work on mask stamina and really talk about why it's important? So we're handling a lot of those cases individually. And hopefully people just understand that it's a requirement, and unless there's a special circumstance, you know, we're going to wear them, especially when, you know, we can't physically distance ourselves from one another. This was a hot topic with some from the first meeting, this notion of symptom screening and self-certification. So we, again, you try to, you know, respond when you hear an overwhelming, you know, response. And there were many parents and some teachers that were concerned that we were going to allow parents to self-certify. Even though we feel strongly that, you know, doing a check every day for 12,000 or now 8,000 students is going to be time consuming, which will mean lots of instructional time, and we have, you know, protocols, and we're going to need to pull staff to help us. We are going to do two things differently. So we still want parents to partner with us, and they need to sign a self-certification card each day. And Julie, if you could advance to the picture that I can read from my screen. So we've purchased lanyards, and a number of our clerical assistants or office administrative assistants today were busy assembling lanyards, you know, for 8,000 students. Families each week will get a card that they will mark a signature and a date that they have done the temperature check and they've done the symptom screening. Students will wear the lanyards when they enter the building, so people can visually see that there's a signature. And then we're going to do, all students will be temperature checked at the doors. This will be a coordinated effort through transportation and building principals to disperse where we're dropping children off to spread the students out as they come into the building. Because one of the things we're concerned about is if all the children are getting off the bus and congregating, and we have to do, you know, each child one at a time, we're going to have a backup of kids outside, or, you know, just congestion that will be hard to keep the kids 6 feet apart for an extended period of time. So we think this visual, we're hoping that this visual signature will allow those kids to move through and just have a temperature screening. For those that don't have the cards, they'll go to a separate location that each principal has identified, and then we'll run them through the check, the symptom check as well as the temperature screening. So before they are deep into the building and into their classrooms, we know that they're symptom and you know, temperature free. So just like everything, you know, this is our best thinking. We're going to now move to, you know, operationalize this at the end of August. And again, we're prepared to pivot if things don't work out, or if teachers get into the building and once we put these wheels in motion, if we come up with a better solution, we will continue to refine and adjust. None of this is, anything in a pandemic is written in stone. I said it's written in sand and the tide's coming in. So we're just going to respond, put our best thinking together, forward, try it, and respond when we need to. So I think that's important, and I hope everybody, that's listening in, understands that. Positive COVID-19 case notification. This, and I don't know if Karen would like to join me for just a moment. This is something that I know you have been, busy with your network working through. I would say that there's a level of frustration with Cook County Department of Public Health, up those in Lake County Department of Public Health, even the CDC. Guidance is changing. It really just depends on who you talk to and when. You'll hear it on a webinar one way, and then you'll see it in writing in another way. And then we have to deeply investigate, which is it? So that has caused a real source of frustration, across local school districts, at least in the area. And I talk to superintendents in Lake Cook and DuPage on a fairly regular basis. But the CDC provides protocols district must follow for notification of contagious diseases. And that's just standard prior to COVID. CDHD provides guidelines for when a letter must be sent home, who the letter must go to, and what the letter must say. So everything is, it's very standardized. As of August 6th, procedures for when a letter must be sent home, who the letter must go to, and what the letter must say were provided to us, or we had not received guidance from them in the way we had with other contagious diseases. So we're still waiting. In other words, we're still waiting. But although CCHD guidance has not been released, we are going to kind of shift from what the Illinois Department of Public Health was saying, and we are going to communicate any positive case to an entire classroom. And Karen, you can pop up here where there's a microphone. That would be great. With the understanding that no action or quarantine must be taken unless the student has been deemed a close contact, which means within 6 feet of COVID-positive person for at least 15 consecutive minutes. So you want to talk to initially, it was only going to be those that were in close contact, and we're going to go a step further because parents were concerned about the guidance.
Correct. So there was concern about not being notified when there was a positive case. So we are going to notify and let people know that there has been a positive case identified. Our district nurses are contact trace certified at this point. So they will contact trace all the positive cases that come in, and they've been doing that already with our 12-month employees. I think we've worked out all of our hiccups, but what we're doing is we're letting everyone know when there's a positive case, and it will say that we're letting you know, unless you've been contacted by a contact tracer, no further action needs to be taken. We're hoping that that's going to make everyone feel a little bit more secure because we'd like to have transparency.
Okay. So while Karen's sitting up here, anything in terms of safety protocols, safety concerns, Karen leads the nurses group, Karen and Sherry. I've been joining those calls. Wenda has been on most of those calls. Now would be a great time. Any questions, anything you're hearing, emails you've received, out all your different friend circles within the community. We have Karen here. What burning questions are out there that we can answer for you?
One question that I got was about the close contact and whether or not that's defined as 15 minutes with or without face covering.
Burning question.
Yeah.
We have been fighting that one. So Sherry went to a webinar for Cook County Department of Public Health last week. And at that webinar for all the schools in the area, it was said by a physician from Strogers that it was only without PPE for 15 minutes or greater. So we followed up, finally got hold of someone at the CDC yesterday who said they were redacting that remark because it wasn't written. And it is officially, according to the Illinois Department of Public Health, 15 minutes, closer than 6 feet. The 15 minutes is cumulative throughout the school day.
And it was originally consecutive.
It was originally consecutive, now it's cumulative, and it's with or without PPE. The only exception to that would be our nurses who will be wearing KN95 masks so that they will not necessarily have to go into quarantine every time they deal with a student who potentially is positive. So what we found out through extensive research, it's 15 minutes cumulative throughout the school day, with or without PPE, for 6 feet or closer.
Okay, thank you.
So what are we saying with regard to quarantining, keeping kids home for a certain period of time, return on negative tests? What is kind of our protocol for return to school for those that have chosen to go to school?
So for return to school, it depends on if they're a close contact or they're actually a confirmed case. And so it's going to be based on symptoms, and it's also going to be based on whatever the CDC protocol is. So currently, and again, this has been changing pretty much weekly, currently it's 14 days quarantine at home if you are exposed, unless you come up with symptoms, and then we will extend your quarantine and turn it into an isolation if it's a positive case. So that's why our contact tracing nurses are going to be pretty busy following up with all the kids that have COVID symptoms because they're so general.
There's no requirement that they test negative before they come back to school.
No, one of the things they were saying was 2 negative COVID tests
Right.
more than 24 hours apart.
Which is what I'd heard, yeah.
So at this point, we're not, because it takes so long to get a COVID test back, it kind of doesn't make sense to have a positive or a negative COVID test to send them back because they'd be waiting that amount of time for the test to come back anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can,
2 weeks, yeah.
and again, Karen, I can, also state that, I mean, if you're waiting for a negative test, sometimes that could take, up to 2 months, and you could still test positive.
Right.
So going back to the, those students who test positive and have no symptoms, because the whole family is positive, and maybe the adults are, have symptoms, and the child doesn't, again, clarify for me exactly when could that child go back to school because of the fact that they don't have symptoms, or how are we going to handle those cases?
We're going to handle those cases on a case-by-case basis. We'll work with the family's healthcare provider because we don't want to bring them home if they could potentially spread the virus. So hoping that, you know, that isn't going to be a widespread event, but we'll work with that case-by-case because we don't have guidance from the state at this point, other than 2 positive tests more than 24 hours apart.
And then those students who are quarantined, because they may be quarantined for an extended period of time, what do we do about educating that student? Do they go into a virtual learning environment? Can we easily move them from in-person to a virtual classroom? Or what can we do to help that student out? Because 14 days is a long time.
Peg wants to come up, or a member of her team is here. Maybe you can come on up in terms of what we're gonna do at the length of time that kids are out. We're certainly concerned for a 2-week quarantine. What we intend to do with children so they continue to receive an education. And it's obviously going to depend on if they're well, you're right, and they can engage. But what are some of the things that we've talked about? You can share that.
Yeah, it's really gonna depend on the amount of time that they're gonna be out. If they're, if they're gonna be out, if they have a negative test, then certainly we would want them back as soon as possible. But we would be working, depending on how many students this impacted. Our numbers in our virtual settings are very high. We would like to be able to put those students temporarily into a virtual setting if they were able to receive instruction. And if that is not possible, what we would be doing is what we would do with any other student who was ill, which would be to make sure that there was contact with the teacher and send home homework so that they could keep up as best as possible. So a couple options, but a lot of that's going to depend on space and bandwidth of teachers to be able to address a lot of students' needs. Like I said, the numbers are very high.
All right.
Right, but I guess just for clarification, does that, is it possible that somebody, because you have the virtual setting and their regular classroom, that somebody could easily go from in person to a virtual that's essentially a different classroom, maybe on a different schedule, maybe completely. Right. So is that even possible to all of a sudden?
It's possible, but I don't want to guarantee it because we have no idea how many students that might be at one time.
Right, and
if you wipe out an entire classroom with quarantine, don't know that we can necessarily replicate that, assuming that the teacher would be able to replicate it at home, but it's the unknown.
We do have some subs in the subpool, and Lisa will be talking about subs, but that are willing to be virtual subs. So if it were to be a case that a whole classroom were to need to quarantine, and I don't know that how likely that would be.
That would be pretty likely.
You know, we'll have to see. Then there's a possibility if the teacher is quarantined but well, we could see if we can, you know, transition that whole class to remote. If the teacher is sick enough that they can't teach, then it might be, we're gonna train subs so they know how to train virtually, you know, and then they would be able to remote in and again, using the platform the way it was designed for short spurts, right, e-learning, they could potentially deliver that instruction if it were to be at a whole class level.
Right, we've talked about a lot of possibilities, but a lot of it's gonna depend on the numbers and when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that if, like, you know, if you have a one-off student who is now quarantined for 14 days, is it going to be easy for that particular student to now just go into one of these virtual
I think it would really
pods?
depend on the
Yeah.
student, and, you know, we would have to weigh those options at the time. Is it better for him or her to continue with the assignments and the teacher
Sure.
that they're familiar with, or, you know,
Yeah.
or potentially if it was gonna be longer, then we might want to talk about something quasi-work for a minute, but we're just gonna look at all the options and the specific student or classroom that happens.
Makes sense. Okay.
Is it possible for, if that would happen, though, you know, one or two students, that teacher that teaches in person could actually have those students in the classroom virtually?
That's part of why we're making sure that the teachers all know how to, through our Institute Day, so that they're all ready to be able to teach virtually. Because they're going to be teaching virtually the first couple weeks of the school year as it is.
Right, so that's what I was thinking,
So,
you know,
yeah.
even if one or
And
two
then we have
kids
the
have to
capacity to be one-to-one, so
be
that could
isolated.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
A little screeching there.
Yeah, is that me?
I don't think so. It sounded like it was from over there. Okay, so any other questions for Karen or from a curriculum perspective in terms of, you know, link to health and quarantine? Which is why that came up, because that's kind of her wheelhouse. All right.
Well, I guess one question just about, I think people have mentioned in the community about how much time will students be without masks? I know you're talking about some breaks and, you know, we'll kind of incorporate that as time goes on, but I know there was, maybe that, reiterating that might be
Sure.
helpful.
So, the initial guidance was masks only when you couldn't physically distance, right? So that's changed to now you're wearing a mask no matter what, even a teacher that's in an empty classroom. So we're you know, wrapping our heads around the fact that if you're a teacher and so the first 3 weeks of school and there's no kids in the building and you're delivering virtual instruction, you're doing so with a mask on. Which, if you ask any educator, we don't understand necessarily why that is. And there's a level of concern with, you know, masks, especially as you're meeting your class, but it's a requirement, so we're going to follow it. When kids come into school live, you're going to have your masks on at all times. You'll take your masks off when you're eating, so again, when the guidance was you only have to have, you can be unmasked if you're physically distancing outside for PE or recess, but not necessarily inside anymore. So we were going to do the 50-50. Half of the kids were going to eat in the classroom, half the kids were going to eat in another space or go outside. So your mask could be off and you could be 6 feet apart. Now that guidance has changed. So to your question, Zubir, how long was the longest period of time kids will be without masks? It'll be when they're eating, and that's allowed, so that's 20 minutes in most cases. In terms of mask breaks, it's different for our special education population. That's going to be built into their IEP, and you'll hear Ann talk about the virtual learning IEP process and the VLP in a little bit. You know, we have to see what that's going to look like. If that's going to be, you know, one kid at a time getting up to go out and take a mask break, if it's going to be during, you know, a small group instruction, that is something we're going to need to figure out because it's different guidance. And now that they're saying they have to keep their masks on, we have to double check to make sure that we can even accommodate the breaks. Initially, when we said mask breaks, the guidance again was different.
Sure.
We didn't change that, it was changed on us. So now it might just be when they're eating and when they're outside at PE, as long as they can physically distance.
Kind of piggybacking on that, and Meg, maybe you can answer this question. Are we encouraging outdoor instruction while we can before winter hits us? So, and it'll be at the teacher's discretion on going outside, or are we asking them to do it as often as possible? Kind of what's the position we're
So
taking
one
on
of the
that?
things that we looked into was buying tents, not like the kind with the sides, like if you were going to a celebration, but just to provide some sun coverage.
Tailgating tents.
Right? Pardon?
Tailgating tents.
Well, we didn't, yeah. Mike said that. Let the record reflect. I did not.
You gotta give the visual.
But so we were looking for tents to provide protection from the sun, Mike. And they're quite expensive. Just like the plexiglass business, you'd wish you were in the tent rental business. And Dana, can you tell me, was it around $800,000?
To lease or rent for just a few months, 2 to 3 months, I think it was about $500,000 for 40 tents, which were about 30 by 60. To purchase tents was about $1 million.
Wow.
Yes, if they even have them.
So we are going to encourage, absolutely, teachers have, at any point, COVID or no COVID, they have the opportunity, right, to take their kids outside to learn, and, we will certainly encourage that. We also will encourage them, utilizing additional large spaces in the building that are available just to spread out and kind of mix it up, because again, in the elementary, students are going to stay, teachers are going to transition. And it's just a matter of, do we want to spend between $500,000 and $1 million to have access to tents for a few months? We thought that it would be a wiser use of $500,000 to $1 million to buy, to use that money towards additional staff to reduce, class sizes and to allow us to, fully staff the virtual learning cohorts.
Right, if it's anything like last year, we'd get 6 weeks out of it for $500,000. It just didn't seem prudent. There was a blizzard on Halloween, so.
Yeah.
Right. So, but to answer your question, absolutely, we'll encourage folks to go outside. The PE teachers are going to be outside, till the bitter end, and I think some of our classroom teachers will as well. All right. Thank you both. Lisa Nuss can come up and talk to us about staffing. I think is that what's next in the plan?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I think I have a slightly older.
If you guys didn't notice, there's a packet to your left, and it's got an addendum to the staffing report.
It is at the back. The staffing report, like Lisa just said, has an additional probably 3 two-sided pages because of the amount of hiring that we had to do. So just to give you an overview, in a typical year, our staffing process starts in January. The initial process ends in March when we post, and then we spend from March till about this time really tracking the numbers, seeing if we have classes that we could either collapse or maybe some classes that need to be added, and then staffing it with certified staff members. So to give you an idea, from March until about 2 weeks ago, we had made about 360 staff changes. That means either your building or your grade level. And we knew it was going to be a high year for new staff because we had so many retirees last year. It was a really high retirement year. So in the last 2 weeks, on top of those 350 changes, we made an additional 250 more to accommodate for both the virtual classes and the in-person classes. So I do have to thank the administrative team. It was quite a gargantuan lift to do that in the last 2 weeks, but between district office administration, building administration, and I personally would like to thank my staff for all the help they did. They were working day and night. But we are at a point, I'm very proud to say that we are set to open. We have the last few hires that we're putting in place. It did increase our staffing allocations in about the 40s, 40 plus certified staff members, because we want to make sure that our class sizes in person are small enough where the kids can socially distance, so our virtual classes are a little larger. And what we had to do is an interesting process, and it doesn't sound fun, but it's like a big puzzle. And what you have is the families who wish to be virtual, and then we also took into consideration the teachers' desires. So some people had medical reasons, some people had family reasons, childcare reasons. So legally, what we have to accommodate for are personal medical issues that fall under ADA. However, we do know that we want staff to feel safe and comfortable. This is a scary time for everybody. So we did take additional input on people other than their own personal medical decisions. And then, or medical conditions. So when we looked at these classes that we had to make from our parents who chose that, we filled first with those who had their own medical conditions, and then others were filled by their certification to make sure that we had staff that were in like teaching positions. So for the most part, we try to keep them with similar students. We did have to group students together so they're not all from one building, but we wanted to keep similar cohorts together, start and end times. And most often we wanted them in the exact same grade level that they had been teaching in the past. Every so often there are a few that are not exactly what people taught last year, but we did take a lot of time and energy to talk to individual people. We know this is different for everyone. It's different for parents, it's different for students, and it's different for staff. So we've tried to make this process as painless as possible and to make sure that people feel comfortable where they are. I am proud that we're able to open. I know other districts have postponed their opening of school because they do not have the staff. I am concerned as we move forward because I have anticipated, and sorry, I wasn't even looking off the slides.
There it is.
There it is. Typically our staff, our subpool is approximately 325 on any given year, and you've heard from us that it's been difficult to supply enough subs to cover our buildings. Unfortunately, right now we only have 120 who are confirmed to come back live. So it will be an effort on a daily basis to make sure that all our classes are staffed. We have worked with ESPA. We have a number of ESPA members who are also have some reasons for them not wanting to come in person, whether it's medical or other reasons. And we took our people who have certifications to sub, and we're training them as our virtual subpool. We do think that the subs for our virtual classes are going to be less than those for live classes, but we wanted to have a pool that was trained into how to deliver that instruction so we can have some continuity of instruction when people are coming in. And we were glad that we had a little cadre of our program assistants, and then we also had 20 additional people from our subpool that said, we won't come back live, but we'll come back if you could teach us how to do it virtually. And so we're taking them up on that offer. They're going to spend the first 4 days of next week training on that. So we will continue to monitor it. Our principals are finishing up their last hires, and we're onboarding them so as many can start as we can. This year, I believe it was about 115 total hires before our change to virtual and in-person instruction with that break. We've cleared the 150 mark at this point. So that does have some implications on the budget. And we didn't go excessively. We looked at classes after classes because we'd like to keep those classes under 20. And even with, some of them hitting 20, we have added quite a number of staff. So we're trying to keep that balance between how many people do we have to have and how much money we're spending on that.
So staffing related, inquiries for Lisa or questions?
Lisa, with you, I do have one. With the positions on the addendum,
Yes.
do you have the certified positions filled at this point that we need to start, or are there some that are still open?
We probably have a handful that we have to get confirmed contracts signed, but even if all of them fell through, we have the capacity to fill all the classes. So we are ready to open.
Do we know the number of virtual classrooms, that we're filling? Like
I do
approximately?
not have that over there. I'd say it's about in the 80 to 90 range.
We're 89, are most of those being, are they teachers that were already here, or that we had to hire new teachers for those classrooms?
It's a combination.
Combination.
And we also had to make sure we met certifications, so, you don't want to take a music teacher and put them in a bilingual class. You want to make sure that they're certified before we put them in.
Okay.
And most of the additional staffing that was required because of COVID, we were able to use care funds for, right?
No,
No.
No.
Okay.
no. We use, and we have a slide here that'll show you how we spent the 1.6 million. And Diana talked about it in terms of Fund 10 and Fund 20. She put up $1.5 million in those two funds for additional staffing needs. So the 1.6 is spent, and we did use some protected nurse space, a few floater custodians,
Okay, that's
and
fine.
additional lunchroom supervisors. That's probably what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
But what Lisa Ness is talking about is the staffing, the actual teachers, certified staff
Yeah.
increases
Okay, that
to
makes
man
sense.
2 different types of learning environments and keep our numbers down.
So let me ask a question about keeping numbers down. I think when we had the early conversations about keeping numbers down, it was about socially distancing in the classroom.
Right.
So, but am I hearing that we're trying to keep numbers down in a virtual classroom also, so
No.
that they're below 20? No.
No, the
Okay.
virtual
They're-
classrooms are higher.
Okay.
They're home.
That,
So
that
that's a
was
little
the
bit of the
original
balancing.
logic that I thought we talked about, that
Yep.
those would be standard numbers, virtual, but the 20 or less was driven into
Just
space
the
and trains
in-person.
and social.
Yeah, the
distancing.
virtual ones are at or target or higher.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, Janice, if you want to kind of make your way up, I'll move through some of the slides. We're trying to figure out, we have a little bit of a disconnect in terms of our orders. But ISBE guidance changes as of July 23rd. It said we strongly encourage prioritizing in-person learning. Again, we talked briefly about this for students with IEPs, English learners, and students under the age of 13. And then we received also at the end of July some guidance in terms of what it should look like in a virtual setting. Whether we choose to have virtual learning classrooms, whether it's when we're starting remote, or whether it's if we go in and out of in-person instruction. At the end of July, they set forth this guidance to us, to school districts in Illinois. The students shall receive at least 5 clock hours of instruction per day in any learning setting. Recommended that at least 2.5 hours consists of synchronous or live learning, which is a big shift from the emergency guidance where it says it's up to each individual, union and management group to kind of reach consensus on what that's going to look like. So this is structured as a 2.5 live across the state with real-time instruction and interaction between students and teachers. And asynchronistic, which could be recorded, paired, group work, or independent work, but it's independent, of a teacher directly delivering that instruction. So there's different ways asynchronistic work can look. School district must provide remote learning services to any student upon request. So we wouldn't necessarily have to offer a virtual learning cohort, but if enough parents requested virtual, whether it would be for a medical or otherwise, even if we didn't want to do that as a district, the state at the end of July said we must. Okay? And then they strongly encourage that all students in any district learning environment continue to receive equitable access to extracurricular activities, and that's certainly easier said than done because there are a lot of restrictions with these extracurricular organizations, like the Big Ten has canceled sports, any other college has canceled sports. The IE, the Illinois Elementary Athletic Association, has suspended all or most sports. So even though they say equitable access, a lot of those decisions have been taken out of our hands. Okay, so sorry, Janice, I called you a few minutes early, but I got excited to have you join us. So just, hang tight. CDC guidance, again, another change at the school level. While opening schools, like opening any building or facility, does pose a risk for the spread of COVID, there are many reasons why opening schools in the fall of 2020 for in-person instruction is important. We know that schools play a very critical role in the well-being of communities. We've heard it time and time again from the spring throughout the summer. Kids need to be in school, and we would love nothing more than to get the kids back to school, but we are in the midst of a pandemic. Schools provide critical instruction and academic support, and we believe part of our rolling reentry will allow us to make sure that we're addressing these two significant bullets that the CDC said we should be. Schools play a critical role in supporting the whole child, not just academic, and that's why so many of our COVID dollars were spent on SEL, because we know kids are going to need that social emotional connection and that learning even more so than before because of the forced closure and the length of time that they've been away from their classmates and their teachers. So that social emotional health will be really enhanced this year, as in terms of District 15. Mental health of students can be fostered through school supports and services. Teletherapies and check-ins are good, and we were highly committed to delivering on those requirements, but nothing replaces having that time, face-to-face with those service providers. Continuity of other special services is important for student success. So when this guidance came out, it was last updated August 1st. It kind of reinforced our decision to, although we were going to start remotely and do the gradual reentry, we felt this really spoke to some of the reasons in which we chose to put a plan in place that would allow us to slowly reopen the building for some of these very reasons. Okay, so here it is. All students will learn virtually until Tuesday, September 8th. This will allow us more time to resolve some of the staffing and sectioning complexities before gradually re-entering. People are still trying to shift between learning environments. We're still receiving support, staff recommendations for accommodations. Doctor's notes are trickling in. It's, there's just no magic wand to make all of this happen as quickly and linearly as we'd like. So it's complex, and as Lisa said, we're closing in on it, but that little bit of extra time will allow us to make sure that we are fully staffed and ready to go. Allows district to monitor the COVID-19 levels and hotspots. We are working, and Renee can speak to this when she talks about EL, with our contact, Karen Baker from Northwest Community Hospital. We are watching hospital data across different zip codes to see, how are we looking across all of the 7 municipalities that we support, all are part of. The rolling reentry reschedule, again, ISBE helped us prioritize who to bring in if we were going to, open our doors. And we did just that. Our youngest learners who we know, kindergartners are just really not able to engage in, e-learning by themselves. And not all of our kindergartners have parents at home that can help them. So we wanted to get them kind of acclimated to school, establish relationships, routine, rapport, teach them how to use their devices. So if we were to have to go back to remote instruction at any point due to a surge or us moving back in the phases, they would have some time. And then our bilingual kindergartners, they're our full-time students, and they need that per mandate. Special education, self-contained, and our transitional bilinguals too, again, to speak to the guidance of the most at-risk groups that we should get in early. And then we're going to do a slow roll from youngest to oldest again, because they want all kids under 13 in, if conditions are such that we can be, but prioritizing kind of youngest to oldest. So that is why we created the schedule that we did. Now again, with all of this, you put a schedule together and a plan in place, and this could work beautifully, or we could find ourselves in phase 3 and none of this is going to work, or we could find ourselves with a spike in cases the way they had in Lake Zurich, the high schools, and we could have to shuffle this plan. But for planning purposes out in the community with our families who we know have childcare issues and work that they're trying to balance, if all goes as planned, this is what our parents know that they can plan around and be ready for. So that's why we did a rolling reentry. I wanted to give you some preliminary enrollment numbers, and again, things are shifting a little. But at the elementary level, we had over 5,000 students that wanted to come to school in person, and just over 2,800 that selected virtual. At the junior high, we had just almost 2,000 students want to come to school in person, and 920 go virtual. And Morgan's working and massaging the numbers to make sure that everybody's accounted for. We still have some families that we haven't heard from, so that's why the numbers aren't exactly, they don't equal 12,000 if you add them up. There's still parents that we're calling to make sure that we know where they'd like to go. We sectioned them in person, but we're trying to confirm that that's where their placement is going to be. So we'll continue to update this. I'll bring numbers back to the board in September once the school year starts, so you can see exactly how it all shook out. So elementary in person, as we've said, they're small enough now to allow for sections between 13 and 19, because that's what we feel as though we can separate kids enough, not only by these numbers, but by taking out any furniture that is non-essential. You know, teachers have removed chairs and couches and, you know, other kind of fun stuff, you know, that they have in their classrooms, and it's just the essentials, those desks. In some cases, our teachers have kept their teacher desks. We've been able to pry some of them out of the classrooms. Some of our teachers have kept their kidney tables for guided reading. Others decided that they would do guided reading on the floor or in chairs. So we really, our directive was really to take everything that's not essential out of the classrooms. And then the junior high numbers are not, were not as small as you can see. Not as many of them opted out. So, you know, in order to get the class sizes down to a level in which we were comfortable, you know, we went to, could you advance please, to we went to the hybrid. And so we're going to run on an A-B schedule. We notified parents, I don't know if it was yesterday or when the letter actually went out. We were working on it over the weekend and the end of last week. But it'll be an A-B schedule, and it'll alternate daily. So one week it'll be A-B, A-B, A. Then the next week it'll start B-A, B-A, B-A. You know, we're smart. We all get that. And that'll alternate daily. Again, this is going to allow us to reduce class sizes and allow for greater physical distancing. So 50% of students, AB, that's what that means, and they will have, when they're in school, it will be that synchronistic learning, and Janice will talk more about this with virtual learning, but what that means is it's that live instruction. You're there with your classmates, with your teacher, you're at school, and your day will feel more typical than not, okay? While the other half of the kids are home, and they're engaged in self-paced or asynchronous learning from home. And again, that can be, a teacher could create in advance a live lesson, it could be a flipped lesson, it could be, they have breakout groups, you know, in Zooms. I don't know if any of you have had that at work where you're all together and then you break out into different rooms. They could have a breakout room for a writing assignment or for a guided reading lesson. They could have different links where they could work with a partner, or sometimes just like in school, you work alone. You know, that's how a typical day flows. Teachers are not instructing 5 or 6 hours in a row. And, you know, kids are just not just working. So Janice will talk again more about this, but that's what asynchronous means. Opportunities, again, for some in-person and some e-learning. Students will be evenly distributed. And our hope is to do the phase-in. Our plan is to do the phase-in on Tuesday, October 13th, which is at the end of the first quarter, which would be a natural time to break because you've had that whole first quarter under your belt. So a few parents, really just a couple, asked for more information than that. So we added these slides today, and we can continue to push more information out to parents as the principals. Once they open the year, they're going to really dive deeply into what this is exactly going to look like, and then we'll continue to update the junior high parents between now and that October 13th date. We talk as a team about we're prioritizing what's right in front of us, and then we're continuing our work. So right now, although the hybrid is important to develop, it will be developed, we have until that October 13th date to fully bake it. And we're going to use every single solitary minute to do it, so when we do it well. So a few other things that we know that we talked about today. We surveyed parents to see if they'd like a hybrid or virtual beginning on the 13th of October. They'll start in August virtually, as you know, and that will go through the first quarter. Certain self-contained or low-incident special ed classrooms may be combined and assigned to another school based on programming, and that's going to be a numbers game. Some of our programs, especially more of our where you have more of your medically fragile kids, the parents really want to keep their kids home. So there might only be 1 or 2 kids in a program at a school that are wanting to come live. So we're not going to have a class of 2 or 3 kids. So we may have to combine some programs that are similar that 1 or 2 teachers could deliver. So that's what that bullet means. On October 13th, student schedules and staff schedules will be adjusted to reflect that hybrid or virtual selection. So again, everybody's together first quarter, and then we'll splinter off to address parent enrollment. Students may be given different teachers or schedules, again, obviously due to this change. Enrollment selection commitment will be through winter break, so it's a 2-month kind of period, or another quarter will go by. And then ISBE guidance requests that if people request a virtual classroom, they can be granted outside of that window. One of the things I'd like to tell ISBE is scheduling is a huge puzzle, and staffing is a huge puzzle, and it's very complicated. And that seems like a simple little bullet, but it could potentially send real ripples through our sectioning and our staffing. So we're hoping that parents, make a good decision and can stick with it for a quarter. If we need to shuffle, I would love to think about doing that at the quarter at the junior high, so we don't have these wild swings in sizes, especially if people we've got to let them go virtual. We have to decide if we're going to let them come back in person, because we're being very careful about how many kids we put in those classrooms.
Yeah.
So if too many want to come back, it's going to throw off all of our hard work to distance kids consistently. So
And then we've got the opposite too, Lori, because if we set virtual classes up, whether at the junior high level or elementary, to have board recommended maximum numbers, and then all kinds of families decide that they want their children to go virtual, that we're going to be in person, that drives up the virtual class numbers.
And your board targets or your guidelines, we really try to adhere to, but we have, prior to COVID, we've gone over those targets. Some will say, especially a little bit more at the junior high. So in some of our virtual classrooms, we will be above target, but we're trying to be mindful of what seems like a reasonable size classroom. A virtual classroom, and that's why we're those targets are something that we're keeping our eye on. Virtual, we want them to be smaller for obvious, or in person we want them to be smaller for obvious reasons. Virtual, we want them, they can get a little bit bigger, but we don't want them to get so big that it just becomes too overwhelming for a teacher to manage. So we're doing that great balancing act. Okay, now it's Janice's turn. Virtual instruction plans and protocols.
Okay, so this is my first time presenting to all of you, so I just thought I'd take a minute to introduce myself. I'm Janice Mathis. I am the new Director of Instructional Tech and Innovation. I think I met you all briefly last November when we did my contract, so I'm grateful to be back, so thank you. So the document that was mentioned
Maybe pull that a little closer.
Can you not hear? Okay, with the mask.
Yeah, it's hard.
So the document that was released by ISBE on July 23rd also included a lot of guidelines as it relates to learning. And so that includes providing a structured, flexible learning environment where that authentic and differentiated instruction is emphasized, that we have some clear and concise communication, and we really want to prioritize that home to school connection through our virtual learning, so we're putting a lot of those pieces into place. And also we want to make sure that our kids, we're looking out for their well-being and their safety in everything that we do. Ongoing support, Dr. Hines mentioned earlier, our institute days, where we're planning these additional institute days to focus on how do we effectively teach in a virtual learning environment. So we want to ensure that we provide that as well as some ongoing support. And then the other recommendation was that, unlike last spring, we will be providing their assessment in the form of grades. So the virtual learning schedule, when we first started looking at this, we really wanted to take a look at what is best practice in terms of how kids learn effectively and what sort of timing they need in a virtual environment. And we ended up coming up with, we really do want this to follow the instructional day as it is normally. Again, we keep talking about this is normal school. It's just looks a little bit different. And so the instructional day will follow the same schedule. The buckets of time or time allocations for each content area are still the same. It's just the way in which we deliver the instruction that's going to look a little bit different. So, for example, in the primary grades, we have about 690 minutes a week allocated for literacy. And that might include things like reading groups, read alouds, word work, things like that. And that's the same in virtual. We will still be delivering those same minutes of literacy. However, it might look a little bit different. So it will be through a live virtual meeting. It might be through an independent self-paced activity. So there's a lot of different ways in which we're going to be delivering this instruction, but again, It follows it's regular school. So we've got those same allocations, same schedules, just some flexibility built in for what that looks like. And there are several examples of schedules up here. These are examples, these are samples, but we wanted to provide them to give everybody an opportunity to see what the day might look like. So for most, I gotta catch my breath under the mask, right? So for most,
Use your microphone though. If you move it closer, then you don't have to.
Then I don't
talk
have
as
to-
loud, but you should keep your mask up.
Okay.
But it'll just help carry your voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So every day we'll start with a live morning check-in, and that's where we really try to focus on building that community, but also providing our students with that structure and that information that they need to be successful throughout the day. So we go over schedules, what are the goals, what are the expectations, but we also want to build some fun into that as well, just like we do in regular school. And it's important to know that we also built some social emotional learning into this, because as we mentioned, we really do want to make sure that we're looking out for the well-being and the safety of our students. So there was several schedules that were sample schedules that are built into the presentation, so we're just flipping through those.
So this is 1 through 3, yep. 4 through 6.
Yeah, 4 through 6, 7 through 8. So in the junior high, we anticipate it will be the same sort of period schedule that they will follow. It's important to note, though, that with that flexibility built into the day, that doesn't mean that every day is going to look a little bit different. Just like in the regular classroom, we're going to have a general schedule that we follow where we do this instructional content area at this time, and we have a special. But depending on whatever the learning objective is for that day, that may shift a little bit, just like it does in the regular classroom. So here's just a few of our student expectations. We really want to the best of their abilities, for them to find a place that's where their place to learn is. It's a quiet, distraction-free place. We expect them to be on time. These live meetings are going to be scheduled, so we're going to want them to be on time for those live meetings so they don't miss any important information or instruction. It's important that student-teacher communication is strong, and in another slide we're going to go over what some of those tools look like for communicating. And we're going to embed a little bit of digital citizenship through this as well, so that they really do understand how to interact with others online and use that respectful language and behaviors. And then we have a responsible use contract that's every year is signed, and that just talks about how we use our technology responsibly. And we expect them to follow the same expectations that are outlined in the student handbook, because this is school. So those are our student expectations. So our staff expectations, we're really focusing on providing that meaningful, viable learning experience for our kids. So we want to make sure that they are working to meet the needs of all learners, that when they begin a lesson, that they clearly articulate what the learning outcomes are. And another important thing is that the procedures we're using and the tools that we're using are consistent and predictable. We don't want to change it up on them every day. We want to have some regularity there. And so in the case of all our teachers, they're either going to be using Seesaw or Google Classroom to sort of manage all of that school content. And in some cases, they may even use both, but they will have one as their main primary platform so that kids know what to expect every day. And then we're going to talk a little bit more with our teachers about that synchronous, asynchronous balance and what that means. So synchronous is live. It's real time. It is not a video recording of yourself. So, and then that asynchronous could be a range of different opportunities. Just for an example, class discussions, right? We could do a class discussion through a live meeting, through a live chat. We have a tool that we use called Parlay, and that allows us to do live roundtable discussions. But then there could also be maybe an asynchronous chat happening within the Google Classroom stream. So these could look different ways, but we want to make sure that we have that balance. And most importantly, that whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, the kids are engaging in an active manner. They're not just passively watching a video if it's an asynchronous activity, that there is some sort of added on or sidecar activity that they're doing that's creating some dynamic learning with that lesson. Classroom community, again, that'll be done in the morning meeting and throughout the day. And we'll be providing them with ideas and strategies for how to do that. The communication tools, we want to make sure there's that continuous stream of communication between the students and families.
So this is your.
Yeah, so here's our communication tools. We have the top one is new. It's a D15 virtual learning page. It is in the website, the D15 website. It currently, you know how we are building the plane as we're flying it. It is not live yet because we still have a few really key important pieces of information that we want to put in there. We anticipate we'll make it live on Friday, but we want to have things in there like not only how do you support your child at home, but those vital tutorials for like, how do I log into Classroom? How do I get into Seesaw? So a lot of those things we want to make sure that they are there if they're ready. And a link to that page is going home with every Chromebook, so they will know where to find it. Last spring, we used Blackboard Teacher Communications, and they will continue to do that. Google Classroom email summaries. If a teacher activates it, a parent can sign up and receive email summaries of what's happening in the classroom. Seesaw for parents. We've just upgraded Seesaw to Seesaw for Schools, so it gives us a lot more features and functionalities, and so parents can either install an app on their phone or go to the website and they can see all of the work that their students have uploaded to the class stream. And then Google Meet, of course, if you need to meet face-to-face, not face-to-face, but virtually have a live meeting with a teacher, that would happen through Google Meet. And then, of course, email and phone. We can't rule out using email and phone, right? So we know that family support is essential to our students' success. So we really want to try to embrace those opportunities that exist from learning at home, provide that access to information, which I just talked about through the website. We want to set some clear expectations for communication for everybody, and then we just really need to be mindful and supportive of all the different backgrounds. And then finally, teacher support. Again, we know teachers have one of the biggest effects on student success. And one of the things that we're doing as a district this year is building collective efficacy. And what that means is that we believe as a whole that we have the power to really create meaningful change in schools. We're providing all types of different personalized professional learning opportunities and also requiring some new digital resources to help support virtual learning. I think that's my last one.
That is.
All right.
Good job. All in 6 weeks. Who has questions for Janice and the work that her team has been just so vigorously putting together, so we're ready for
I am
the start
smiling
of
under
school?
here, I know you can.
She's
We
smiling.
can see it.
We can see with your eyes.
Yeah.
Hey, can I get a question in terms of scheduling?
Yes.
The, when it's synchronous learning, will there be set class times?
Yes, yeah, so that will be communicated, and generally speaking, they will always be very similar to the same, unless the teacher has some other learning objective, but they will, yeah, typically be the same times.
One question was, how will counselors and clinicians engage with students virtually?
I think Anne is gonna.
Will she? Okay.
Yeah, and we'll talk
Okay.
about that in
Yeah.
terms
I'll hold
of
on that.
related services, and
Yeah.
if it's virtual, there'll be Zoom meetings and whatnot, but
Yeah.
Anne can talk about that.
I mean,
Perfect.
I guess I had a question. So you have these, the sample schedules that you put in there. So to the extent that, you know, there's a slot on the schedule that's asynchronous type of learning where maybe the teacher's not there, is that, I mean, is there an enforcement mechanism for that? Because, like, for instance, it's like, you know, 1 o'clock science time, this is the time to do this activity.
Right.
You know, I mean, I like the idea that you have a schedule. I think that's a great idea. But I'm wondering how is that just the teacher telling them, hey, at this time you should do the
the
science?
schedule and the activities and then the expectations for each day will be built into either Google Classroom or Seesaw, so they will know what they need to do. In terms of monitoring that, one of the things that we're looking at is an app called
Go Guardian.
It's Go Guardian. And that actually, it works in the cloud and it allows teachers to create what's called a scene. And through, they can actually set time frames where kids are supposed to be on X, Y, and Z sites, or as one to as many sites as you want to allow them to access. And then you get reports at the end of the day for all of your kids that says, here's how their time was spent. So that's going to really provide us with some great information about how students are engaging. So, for example, if we have a student who's not engaging, or they're engaging in things maybe they
Sites that
shouldn't
are not
be engaging in, right?
ABC sites, they're on the other sites that we don't want them on.
Right,
we'll have
right.
data.
So we'll be able to then address that, and so if a child doesn't have their camera on in a meet, right? We'll know whether it's because they don't want their camera on, which is okay, or are they doing something they shouldn't be doing. So I think it's going to be a great way for us to really help to build some of that student agency by giving them some structure, and then we can actually then address some of the things that are happening at home virtually.
So what are your pilot numbers? I know when I checked in with you a couple days ago, you had around 67 staff members that very quickly responded that they would be willing to pilot. Has that moved beyond 67 at this point, do you know?
Last I checked, actually, I had about 3 more emails right before I walked out the door of people asking to be on it. So we're probably up around 70 now, people that wanted to be on participate in the pilot. And really our primary purpose for that is rather than trying to roll this out to the entire staff at one time, we wanted to do it with some people that had some experience with these type of tools before, so then we can really understand what their questions are going to be and where we need to provide support and training for them.
I guess another question I just had about taking into account the varying degree of knowledge of digital and from parents' perspective. I mean, are they going to, like, from your perspective, with all the different programs that we're putting in, if you have parents who are not going on to Seesaw and some of these apps that are very helpful, are they going to be able to get at least enough basic communication through email, or even some through just the paper form? Are they going to be able to get enough for them to at least know the basics as to making sure their kids are learning?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's going to have to be a little bit of work on the parents' part, I think, to go in and look at some of these tutorials and some of these things that we're providing. But we are sending home with all the Chromebooks a paper packet that talks about a lot of these tools and how you use them. So there is, so at the very least, they have the information that they need to get started and get their kids logged into the Chromebooks and accessing these tools.
And then Janice, you have Beth, a new member of your department, working on parent use or parent universities that will help teach them how to use these tools and how to engage with their children when they're home virtually as virtual learners. So do you want to talk a little bit about Beth's work on that?
Yeah. So what we're going to be doing is putting together some of these parent universities that will focus on things like how to use some of these different tools in Google, or how do you interact with Seesaw in order to see what your kids are doing. And we're going to be providing those really almost in a newsletter format, so that we can, so everything is really sort of simple to access and see, and we'll be able to translate everything into different languages for all of our parents. So we have a list of probably about 30 different parent universities at the moment. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but we're certainly going to try. To start the school year, we're putting several tutorials on that virtual learning webpage that I discussed on D15, which should be up on Friday. And then we will start rolling out our parent universities shortly thereafter.
There will also still be the classroom newsletters that parents are used to receiving, so that they can have the conversations with their kids about just general things that are going on in the classroom, whether they're virtual or in person.
I guess I'm pretending that I'm getting these questions from the public, but that's just really my own concerns.
Okay, it's good. Somebody on Facebook's asking it right now.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you did it live. So no one has to speculate.
Janice, what's the feedback from your pilot educators, the teachers that you're working with? How are they liking these new digital tools? Is it easy? Is it, cumbersome? What have you heard?
Well, we have not started the Go Guardian pilot yet. That's actually going to start on Thursday. We'll be having a meeting with those teachers that are participating. We actually have the people from Go Guardian that are going to be presenting to them and giving them an overview of the tool and how to get started. But the feedback that we've gotten, they're very, very excited about having this tool.
Junior high teachers are like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
bring it. Let me make sure
Yeah.
I know what they're up to. They're like all over this.
Yeah. And then with Seesaw, the Seesaw, a lot of teachers used the free version last year, and just last June we upgraded the Seesaw for schools. And in the new teacher orientation, I had the pleasure of giving the Seesaw session, and it was so well received. They loved the tools and the features, and I've gotten a lot of follow-up from them on what do I do next. So it's been really, really pretty fantastic.
So those, of the 4 days we have coming up, 2 institute, combination of district and building with a little bit of tech, and then you have 2 other days where it's going to be all e-learning. So in September, we'll really be able to deeply answer that question because we will have gone through those 4 days, and teachers will really see the platforms and all the enhancements and whatnot, and then they'll have a chance to start using them when school starts, and then we can report back.
Yeah.
But I think it's very exciting what
Yeah.
they've put together, and it will just continue to build. Again, this is 6 weeks, and then in another 6 weeks, and imagine where we'll be in another 6 weeks. So, yeah. And this is all great for where we are now. But what I'm most excited about, well, I'm absolutely excited for COVID to, be in the rear view. But then, what are we going to be able to do with all of this tech in the future?
Yeah.
And what it's
Good
going to
point.
mean for like powerful learning and engagement, and just how we're going to layer it across all of our content areas and grade levels. It's very exciting to think about how we can apply this in a different educational environment.
Has there been any thought, this is another question about, just like we were talking about, digital ethics that you're teaching the kids and stuff, are there going to be anything with respect to, dress codes? I'm just thinking aloud that a lot of these kids, it's just, like straight in your night suit and you're starting in school. Now that might be fine because why not? But just to add to the idea that it is school still.
Right, yeah, we've actually had some conversations around that, and
Yeah.
the expectation is that they would follow the same things in the school
dress
handbook.
code.
So if it's in the handbook, that would be the expectation for what they're doing at home.
Okay.
I have a question with regards to Seesaw and Google Classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Are those similar types of applications, and are we standardizing as far as what teachers are using for different classes? I'm just wondering if there's consistency between all the classes.
Right, yeah, so they are similar, but not the same. So Seesaw is it works with all grade levels, but typically our kindergarten, first, second, and possibly third grade teachers, this isn't the ideal tool for them because Google Classroom is maybe for a little bit older kids. It can be used at younger grades, but Seesaw is a far better sort of learning management tool for those younger grades. In the older grades, Google Classroom is part of the whole G Suite system. All of those things work together, the Drive, Docs, and all of that. So essentially, it's not necessarily standardized, but it kind of does it on its own just because of the nature of the tools. So we're going to see our teachers that are teaching the younger grades using Seesaw, and our teachers teaching the older grades using Google Classroom. However, one of the things that teachers using Google Classroom may do is if they want to layer on like a portfolio building piece into Google Classroom, those two things seamlessly work together. It's really quite nice how it happens.
And in the spring, we tried to say, use Seesaw if you are teaching primary and use Google if you're intermediate or above. And teachers asked for flexibility because some were more comfortable with one platform or the other. So we kind of then took that feedback to say, okay, now that we're going to make this how we start the year, we'll provide the two and give folks flexibility.
And when we looked at the Bright Bites data, which is actually another way that when we come back, we'll be able to share some of that data as far as how these tools are being used, what grade levels they're being used at. But when we looked at the data, we were really surprised to see so many of our junior high teachers were using Seesaw in addition to classrooms. So we didn't want to say only these grades can use this or only these grades can use that. I mean, they really do work together very nicely. So I think giving them the option to use one, the other, or both really provides that autonomy and allows them to really meet the needs of their kids in the way that they envision.
Okay, thanks.
And thank you all again for approving the first time ever a director of instructional technology for District 15.
I think one of the best things that was
I
said
mean-
today is you talking about getting your contract signed in November and us sitting here and thinking how fortuitous it was that you are already on the plan before
Yep.
COVID hit. Because it'd be a different scramble.
Oh, yeah. That's putting it mildly. Yes, all right, Jen,
Okay,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lauren, one quick note,
Yeah.
we will be updating the packet that's attached so that this version of the presentation
Yes.
is up there, right?
We
Okay.
worked on this at team today.
That's what I
We finalized
figured.
it, so yes, we will.
I just wanted to make sure, because I know the virtual stuff will be up.
That's what Julie and I were sidebirring about. We're going to do program. So yes, we will. Sorry. Special education, Ann. If you could come up, please. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Not really.
No.
To use that recess voice, young lady.
Okay, I can be real loud. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
You can? Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go over some of the rollout plan for special education programs. So we're going to start with this slide that we have here. Naturally, our self-contained programs are smaller in nature. They have ISBE guidelines that they cannot exceed 13 in a classroom. And so just naturally, our classrooms are smaller, allowing for a greater opportunity for social distancing. And as Dr. Hines has indicated, there's priority language in the ISBE guidance of making sure that we, as much as possible, prioritize special education and EL. So on the 14th of September, coming back district-wide, so K-8, our AIM program, our low incidence programs are AIM, SIP, and MILE, and those stand for the Structured for Independence program. That's a SIP program which is located, the EC SIP is at CLA, and we also have SIP programs at MJ and Sunling. Our AIM program, which stands for Academic Instruction for Meaningful Education. Special ed has a lot of acronyms, so I just want to go through them so that, I'm learning them just in district language because I'm
Very
new,
well
but
so
then,
far.
yes, but also just for you all and if you have any questions. That program is located at Whiteley and then Winston Junior High. And then our MILE program, which stands for Modified Instructional Learning Environment. And that program is housed at Sanborn and Sandburg. Those are our low incidence self-contained programs. And then those focus on functional academics, our life skills, functional communication, socialization, at times activities of daily living, and some of these programs have curriculum-based community trips when we are not in the middle of a pandemic. So there are some different academic unique opportunities because of the unique learning styles of our students in those programs. Our high incidence programs are our SEAL program, which is at TJ and FC Whiteley, and then also our LEAP program. SEAL stands for Social Emotional Academic Learning, and LEAP stands for Learning Environment for Academic Progress. And LEAP is at TJ, Kimball Hill, and Winston Campus Elementary. So those are our programs that will be prioritizing the rollout back K-8 grade levels on September 14th. And then on the 21st, our early childhood special education programs throughout the district will come back. However, ECTEC, which is our grant program, so early childhood is special education, but our grant programs are our preschool for all programs and our blended programs. Those will be coming back later and returning to our district on October 5th. Conyers Learning Academy has a staggered start that we're also hoping to bring to the district. September 14th for our self-contained programs, so the EC SIP program that's housed there, as well as the multiple needs program and the ACEs program that are typically upstairs at CLA. Those will be half-day for 3 weeks, starting on the 14th of September and returning full day on the 5th of October. And then again, September 21st for our special education early childhood classrooms throughout the district, and October 5th for ECDEC and our blended classrooms. So any questions about our special education self-contained program rollout?
Can I just ask,
Sure.
in terms of percentages, what percent of our students are coming back for in-person learning for our special ed programs?
Okay, so for
Low or high?
those that have, for low incidence or high incidence, or those that have selected in-person versus remote?
Yeah.
Okay,
correct. Mhm.
so the July 20th data, which is when families selected their in-person or their remote option, we had just over 300 families of students with IEPs, and we have 12 that selected remote learning, the virtual learning option, and we have 1,200 total students with IEPs in district.
Thank you.
Sure. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more too when we talk about how we'll plan for the students that are in virtual.
You said 12 out of 1,200?
No, I'm sorry. We have 1,200 students in district with IEPs. 300 of them, their families elected for the virtual learning option.
Got it, okay.
For at least the first trimester, if not the year. Okay, so for our students whose families elected that they will be a part of the Virtual Learning Academy, we have worked with the district attorneys as well as our department and administrators in the building to create what's called the individualized virtual learning plans. And that's for students that will be in the virtual learning setting and have an IEP. So what that means is the educational teams come together and they take the current IEP of the student and they look at the goals and the services and the accommodations and the supports that the child requires, that the student requires, and then collectively with the parents, they come to agreement and decisions about what that will look like in the virtual setting that Janice has just described. So our students will be participating in virtual learning, so both asynchronous and synchronous learning. And so the IEP team comes together to determine when and where throughout that process the students will be receiving their special education supports. So I just want to make sure I have everything. So our principals and our assistant principals and our special education coordinators have spent the last couple weeks planning these meetings and creating these plans and the drafts for families and scheduling the meetings and conducting them so that we have a clear understanding of what the expectations of the special education services will be for our students who are virtual. So our starting point is those 300 students that had elected the virtual, as well as the recent decision of our junior high to go virtual for the first quarter. So every student who elected to be in the virtual learning that has an IEP, as well as all junior high students for just that first quarter, will have a virtual learning plan. And if and when students return, whether it be because we go to phase 5 or because at the trimester the families are electing to come back to in-person learning, or that's when our junior high comes back to in-person learning, it reverts back to the original IEP and the plan that's in place for the student.
So in July, you recall some people really wanting more information about special education. So again, just like Janice, Ann's been here since July 1, and over the last 6 weeks, they've developed this whole process. Have reached out to the 300 virtual families to start those meetings, and then we'll go now back to those INSPED, or the IEP students in junior high to schedule these meetings. So very individualized, but it's also a very aggressive. You guys have really tackled this.
And that's really our coordinators, our assistant directors helping to develop it, and then our assistant principals and our coordinators implementing it in the buildings.
So again,
so
those
big
extra
kudos to them.
Staff members that we asked to help us just do the work when we're not in a pandemic, have played an absolutely vital role. Again, because COVID has put a whole heaping layer of more on these staff members. So thanks, you know, again, for the increase in staff allocation for special education coordinators. We would have, again, be in a very different place if we didn't have those extra folks.
And I want to address, Sam, your question specifically about clinicians. So our students, the way that they were sectioned in the virtual learning academy were, as much as possible, kept together with students from their school. And if possible, like Elisa had said, a teacher from their school. Every teacher is assigned a building that they're connected to, and each of our students, regardless of what classroom they're in, they're receiving their related services from their home school. Because again, students could be coming back at the trimester. We're going to be phasing back at some point once we're phase 5, hopefully sooner than later. And ideally, if it's a student who's been in our district, they have a relationship with those service providers. So if they're a student that has a 504 or has an IEP, they will be connected with the clinicians from their school. And so they will continue to receive those services as identified through that IVLP process, that individualized virtual learning plan process. If it is a student who is not currently identified with us, each of our virtual classroom teachers are assigned to a school. And so they then can connect with the clinicians, so the social workers or the psychologists or the counselors at that school to say, you know what, something's, I need to talk with somebody about one of my students. Here's what's going on. Can we set up a problem-solving team meeting? Can you check in with the family, pop into my class, set up a time with the student or the family? And so there are resources that are available. And if they're not directly connected to the child because of an identified plan that they have, our teachers have that resource through the school that they're assigned to. And then I think, Laura, you said mass as well. So I want to briefly touch on the mass. So through the IEP process, so if our families are coming in person, the standard way that we look at the mask exemptions would be through that IEP or the 504 process for the team to consider the medical doctors, the physician note that the doctors are providing. We are asking families to consider granting consent for our school teams to speak with the doctor to see what those alternatives were. Like Dr. Hines said, looking at increasing stamina, mask breaks. If they can't tolerate a mask, can they tolerate a different type of face covering? We have also ordered in district a number of shields. Dr. Hines ordered one for all staff members, but additionally, we have some extra ones that may be appropriate for students that might require this type of support. And for our staff members, we also, in student services and a couple of the other departments like EL, have purchased masks that are clear so that they can have the opportunity to, if needed. So for example, if you're in a speech therapy articulation lesson and it's really critical that the student can see your mouth and the production of the sounds, that they have that mask available.
Great.
Were there any other questions or things that you'd like me to discuss? I too am smiling. I'm not sure if you can tell. I should have worn this clear mask.
They steam up, so I have to figure out, because I tried one. So I figure out how to get them not so steamed up. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. And then Renee, you're next at bat.
We call that the closer. Is that
Yeah.
right? Is that what it is? All right. Thank you, everybody. It's good to see you again. It seems like it's been a long time. So, members of the board, President Shupai, thank you. This is a brief overview of some of the efforts we've had to maintain our gifted programming during this very unique time. So prior to COVID, we had plans illustrated on the left to phase out a couple of classes, actually a total of 4 over the next couple of years. That's, of course, related to enrollment trends and space needs at a couple of our schools. Of course, with COVID and the need to offer families the option of in-person or remote learning, we put a hold on that plan to maintain those staff within the program so that we could offer the full array of services using those 4 priorities, making sure that each of our students in the gifted program, regardless of site, still would be able to remain with a gifted teacher regardless of the option they chose. So we were able to provide that type of arrangement where whether it was remote or in person, each child was still assigned to a gifted teacher in the existing structure that we have currently. We also are working with transportation to provide those families with transportation. So for some, they've indicated they do not need transportation or do not want to be on the bus. Some still require transportation because their children are moving to a site outside of their home school. That's very, very common, of course, for our gifted program. And as we'll talk about in the next slide, we had to do a little reorganization of some of the in-person classes to maintain the low class sizes, yet still provide that gifted service for children. So children will still need the bus service to get from their address to the new classes they're attending. And finally, we want to make sure that within our in-person classes, just like we are doing in general education, the class sizes are such where social distancing can be promoted and maintained to enhance our safety. The one final thing, like I mentioned, is we put a hold on some of the staffing changes we had anticipated. So we had anticipated over the next several years phasing out classes as well as teachers. For the teacher that we did phase out, and then we were only going to have one class that only had one grade instead of the typical two, we paused that so that we could use those staff to support the program changes that are illustrated actually on this slide here. So instead of having the 5 sections of in-person at 3-4 and 5 sections, actually 6 of 5-6 in person, we've reorganized to provide 3 sections of 3-4 at the following schools: Frank Whiteley, Marion Jordan, and Winston Campus Elementary, and 4 sections of in-person 5-6 at Central Road, Whiteley, Hunting Ridge, and Marion Jordan. So you can see that a couple classes were consolidated from our original spread so that we could make sure that we didn't have classes that just had 1 or 2 students, and that those classes would still be under 20. So we changed our configuration a little bit, and of course, hence the need for continued transportation. Then underneath, we have 2 sections for the 3-4 class and 3 sections of 5-6 that are taught by our gifted teachers for remote learning. So we were able to provide that for our students as well. We've had quite a bit of people coming to us, some with some concern because of the reorganization, some actually with praise that we're able to offer both sections. And thankfully, we've been able to use some of that input to adjust some of our original plans to better suit our families, because of course, these are families who establish relationships at their classes. They're usually fairly stable, but of course in the COVID environment, it's a little bit less stable than it has been. So thankfully, we've been able to take their feedback and incorporate it to the degree that we could. So we're really appreciative that we were given that information and were able to respond to it. We're looking to maintain this for as long as we need to. And of course, if we return to phase 5, we'll look at reconfiguring back to the original configuration until our study of the program is finished, and we can talk about what changes in the future we might want to institute. Is there any questions that anyone has about gifted programming? No?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I did like the tailgate tent comment, by the way. I thought
Thanks.
that was pretty good.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Renee will talk about developments with the multilingual program, the logistics, and how we'll support our multilingual families.
Sure, thank you. So as you can imagine, learning English as a new language, it presents an extra layer of challenge for some of our families through a remote learning platform, right? And for our students in particular, it can be even more challenging for them to access grade level curriculum and for them to continue to grow their English language skills. And so ISBE has prioritized learning and in person for our English learners. In addition to that, we know that it can be extra challenging for our parents of our English learners to support remote learning while they're at home in a language that's not familiar to them. So aside from those reasons and the fact that it is legally required, we know it truly is a best practice for our students to have the opportunity to be in person, to have the opportunity to interact with their peers, and also to collaborate, to be exposed to English learner role models. And it also affords our teachers the opportunity to provide a great many more language supports in the classroom for our students in person. So our plan for bringing our English learners back is to start with our students who are part of transitional bilingual education programs. So those are our students who are in buildings where there are programs where we have 20 or more students who speak the same language at the same site. So on September 8th, our bilingual kindergarten students will return along with all of their general education peers. And then on September 14th, we have 763 bilingual students that we will bring back to our classrooms. Our Spanish self-contained classes in grades 1 through 4 will return for a full day of instruction at the buildings mentioned there. And then we will also offer the opportunity for our students who are part of transitional bilingual education programs who speak Japanese, Telugu, Polish, Korean, Bulgarian, and Tamil in grades 1 through 6 at Whiteley, Pleasant Hill, and Willow Bend to also return for up to 1 hour of personal in-person instruction each day. And then the remaining ESL and bilingual resource students will return to school along with their grade level peers. So that is our plan. Did you have any questions at all?
Are you getting pushback from families for the 1 hour of in-person instruction? I mean, does that impact work schedules and so on?
So far, we've had very positive response from our families that have opted, and it's for our families who have opted for in-person learning. So those who opted for virtual learning will continue to learn virtually.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
And lastly, I don't know if it'll be Tom or Claire. Is Tom here? I'm back there with this fancy District 15 map. I'm going to talk a little bit about transportation, or I can, it's up to you. Happy to take it. If you're looking for sharp, you may as well come up.
Very on brand.
Okay.
How do we get those masks if we want them?
Oh, I should have brought them. We'll get you one.
Yeah, okay.
I'll get you one.
I mean, you know, that's a good thing maybe for
Special
the foundation.
treatment,
That's good for the
Zubair.
foundation.
Wow.
You only
I know,
have to talk to the right
I'm
people.
the elder statesman. It's my job to ask.
We should have thought of that. We're sorry. We gave them to all the new teachers, and it's been pretty nice. So we'll get each board member for the September meeting.
Zubair's basically saying
Thank
he's
you, Dr.
tired of
Hines.
the light up pen.
Yeah. We'll get you a light up map.
Need some other bling, huh?
Yes.
Instead of the blue lanyards, we did find light up lanyards. They were a little expensive though, so we couldn't go that route. Okay, so all these plans, right? And we've got to still transport our students. So, Tom, do you want to talk a little bit about all the hard work and where we've been and the opt out and?
We have over the summer we have gone in many different ways to try and get all the students that need transportation to school. Laurie and myself talked before we put out the questionnaire to the parents. How many students do we need to move away from in learning to make the comfortable ride? That was 3,500. We hit over 4,000. So at the moment we're transporting about 5,500 kids this year. We were given the mandate from the state, and going back some weeks it was 12 to a bus, then it was 23 to a bus. They eventually said 50 to a bus. I have not gone to 50. 50 on a 71-seat bus, we would be forcing students to sit 3 to a seat. So our number is 45. My staff has worked very hard to try and keep that 45 down to 39, 40, so it gives us room for expansion, the odd 1 or 2 kids. So we have all the routes. We have put in place 534, actually it's 535 individual routes. We had 1 out of district added today. So we're 535 individual routes on a 2-tier system. So it's 2 runs in the morning, 2 runs in the afternoon, plus the kindergartners, and then of course the out-of-district schools. We're using 120 of our 162 buses at the moment this year to do that. maximum kids on a bus 45, except for a special ed. And a lot of the special ed routes will be 2, 3, no more than about 5 students on a bus.
And Tom, that capacity of your special education buses are about 15 typically?
They are actually our special ed buses, depending if it's a wheelchair bus or a regular small bus. The regular small bus is about 30, 35. The wheelchair buses differ from 18 to 50. But again, you take seats away depending on how many wheelchairs we put on them. Okay. At this time of speaking, we're only using 7 of our 15 wheelchair buses this year. But again, we've seen this in previous years, and then the wheelchairs tend to increase as the year goes on. So we'll have the buses ready if the need arises for extra wheelchairs for that. Drivers started today picking their routes. We had the first 50 drivers through, having their few minutes. They're all very happy to be coming back. They're all very happy to coming back to work, which is very nice to see. We have lost a few drivers during the summer. In fact, in the last week, we've lost another 3. I'm actually expecting that may increase a little over the next week, but we have some drivers coming through in training, and we will continue to replace them. We currently have 133 drivers in place. We have 7 drivers in training. My goal is to have 145 drivers, so that if we do have any situations where we have to quarantine a driver, we have somebody to step in to the routes as quick as we can. Any questions?
And because of the opt-outs, we did not have to move to a 3-tiered system?
We did not have to move.
Tom spent a significant amount of time figuring out what that would look like, an early, a mid, and a late schedule. So because of virtual learning, plus parents that kind of answered our plea to not take transportation unless they really needed to, it allows for that greater physical distancing as well as not to have to move to a 3-tiered system. I thought that would be just one thing. That would have been the straw that would have broken the camel's back. But
I've still kept it in the background.
That's like a future plan.
Always ready.
Always ready. Okay.
All right, any questions around transportation? And then we'll round out with 2 other slides, and then we'll move on to Elizabeth. I apologize.
How does that 145 number compare to last year?
145?
145 number of drivers that we're trying to target?
Our number last year, we struggled to get to 150.
Okay, so we're staying about the same,
We were about the 143, 144 last year, so we have lost a few.
Okay. We're still trying to stay close, because if we have to quarantine based on, a positive test or an exposure, we want to make sure we have some sub-drivers as well. So Tom's working to keep it all moving. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
I'll quickly move through these slides just because several people in the community have asked. We did receive $1.6 million of federal dollars linked to our Title I allocation, and as fast as we received it, we've spent it, and then some. We purchased PPE, so face masks and a variety of other personal protective equipment for staff, as you heard Ann say, for students, and we purchased 1,300, just over 1,300 grade 4 Chromebooks. The board approved grade 5, separate from COVID prior to. This was so we could then go 1-to-1. By doing 4th grade, we could redistribute Chromebooks. Everyone will have a device. 315 hotspots that we're working to get in the hands of our families, as well as many of our bilingual liaisons are trying to help our parents get the low-cost internet so we don't have any connectivity trouble. The Seesaw platform licensure that Janice talked about will pay for protected health space employees, 1 per school. So if a kid has COVID symptoms, they'll go into a protected health space until they can be picked up separate from the nurse's office. Floater custodians, because we'll have those increased cleaning needs. Sanitation supplies, certainly more dollars being spent to have additional cleaning supplies for custodians, as well as to have in each classroom, spray bottles and rags, so teachers can use it if they'd like. The SEL curriculum, as was noted, and additional lunchroom supervisors, because we are going to try to spread. Kids are going to be eating in the classroom and in other places in the building, and we need more supervision, both inside and outside, because kids will need to be spread further apart. Other expenses for the FY21 final budget will be shared with the board in September. That will largely be additional personnel, as we talked about, but we'll talk about that in Fund 10 and 20 at our next meeting when they do the final budget adoption. Lastly, the hybrid, always a controversy. Shouldn't we have done a hybrid? One of the reasons we were reluctant to do a hybrid is because of this slide, right? We first and foremost wanted to educate every child every day in person with teachers, and with the hybrid, it's the synchronistic and asynchronistic, so we can have that every child every day with the teacher. So that was one. Another one, knowing that we have a family of people, whether it's a dual income family, or whether it's families that don't have any work flexibility, we know it's a hardship. It's become a hardship not only then too for our families, but for our teachers, because some districts are fully remote, some districts are hybrid, some districts are in person. So, and we have teachers that live and staff members that live in a variety of different communities. So it's created a need for childcare, and although we have enough on our plate, as you can see, we do want to provide this as a service to both staff and the community. So we began to look into ways in which we could alleviate some of that stress to see if we could bring some childcare options here to staff and community. So we're working with the Palatine and Rolling Meadows Park District, as well as Hoffman Estates, really, to provide quality childcare for families within our community. We've had numerous meetings with them. The issue is always space, right? Where can we house these programs? So the park districts are working on a variety of leads. They're taking a look at some programs that they currently have in some of their spaces, seeing if they can shift those and provide affordable childcare for the community. We're collaborating with a company called Right at School to potentially provide childcare for District 15 staff, but again, space remains a key issue. So we've been inquiring about the use of St. Colette's in Rolling Meadows as a childcare site. After weeks and weeks and weeks, literally, of email and calls, and Julie and Morgan and I were all, trying, even somebody contacted Frank that, somebody that Frank knows about St. Colette's. We have been able to set up a tour of the space tomorrow. So we will see if it meets our needs, and then there's a cost to that. There's a rental cost, and it's per square foot. So we'll figure out all the details. We'll see what that cost is, and then we'll see how we can do it as a shared expense through Right at School, and a combination if they use a portion and the park districts use a portion. We've got some logistics to work on, but these are some child care leads that we have that we're looking into. We are certainly aware that it's a tight turnaround. We're doing our best, and we really are doing this as a service to staff and community. We are not in the daycare business. Other essential workers have figured it out, so we're just trying to help because we know that this creates a level of stress to our families. So we're doing our best to see what we can provide as a service. So I just wanted you to be aware of where we stand with the child care factor.
Are you thinking? Yeah. I'm just listened to Tom talk about transportation, and now thinking about childcare off-site or at Park District facilities or St. Colette. That creates complexity also with transportation.
Right. So if it was a child that was, it depends on where they live and where they go, and we don't know if we would transport or if the parents would do the drop-off. We would have to work through the logistics on that, but it could, you're right, it could have transportation implications. If it's for teachers or educators, or employees in the district, they would drop them off and pick them up. But for the families, we would have to figure out if we would be able to provide transportation or if it would be incumbent upon the parents to do so. Or if parents don't have transportation, maybe we could provide it. We would have to figure out what that would look like. And we may or may not be able to make either, may not be able to make this work, but we are trying. And we wanted you to know that we know it puts people in a tough spot, and we're doing what we can to help. So I know we've kind of done a Q&A as we've moved through. Are there any final questions for me or the team from the board?
One thing I was kind of thinking about as we were going through there, with regard to the virtual schedule, will teachers say, hey, at 10 o'clock, everybody be on, Then you're going to go at 10:30 for some independent time, and then at 1:30 I want you back. We're going to do science. Is it going to be up to the teacher's discretion? Or are we saying those 2.5 hours are all going to be in one block? What is?
I think that we've been working very hard right now to set the special schedule, and we've given them sample templates, and there's minute allocations. I think it's going to be a combination of some teacher, but also they're going to have to work with other service providers to schedule, to fill that schedule. So, because people are going to push in, whether it's related service staff, some of our counselors, or for specials. So I think it's going to be a little bit of both. Meg, would you agree? And we've been working for several days,
nonstop
literally
on
in the
scheduling.
basement.
Teachers are still going to have to develop their schedule once they get their special schedule. I mean, everybody laughs that the specials kind of dictate the whole working of the school, but it's kind of true because we have a lot of teachers who, specials teachers who travel from one building to the next to be as fiscally responsible as we possibly can. So now that they have that special schedule, or they will have it within the next 24 hours, then they can work to establish their classroom schedule, and they will still need to submit that to the office or to the administrator who's overseeing the virtual. So they're still gonna have to do that so that we know where everybody is, just like when we're in school. We're gonna know what period Mrs. So-and-so's class should be having reading or language arts or math or what have you.
So it could be something where school starts at 8:45, everybody's on at 8:45, we take attendance, and then we go to reading for a half hour, and then the teacher says, okay, it's independent learning time, we'll see you guys back here at 11:30.
Or probably more like, what gives out an assignment, and we're gonna come back and I'm gonna check on everybody periodically, but we would like to see this finished by 10:30, and then we're gonna move on with our day.
Okay.
Okay.
Lisa, may I suggest that, just because Elizabeth, I'm sure you're fascinated by our plan, but I'm going to propose, if the board is amenable, that we pause momentarily for 4.3, 4.4, and 4.5, if it's okay.
Yep.
Move to 5, and then go back.
Yes.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
should we finish questions
Because
first?
you've been so patient, and I probably should have done that earlier, but we were just in a groove, so I apologize.
Lori, are we gonna push off then any board questions to the return to learn?
We can come back if you're okay, or if you want to do questions now, they can just get settled. If you have more questions, please, please.
I think we'd be better just kind of keep the questions together so everybody
Sure.
doesn't lose their train of
just
thought.
get comfortable.
And then, and then we'll
All
go.
right. Perfect.
Questions?
So as we have this rolling reentry schedule, what would be the factors that we would consider for, other than, of course, moving to, back to phase 3 or?
Right, that will be the primary driver, or if we were to see a spike in cases. We are in close communication with, again, Northwest Community Hospital. Karen is monitoring, by zip code, and we would be looking to the health providers in our area to see if there would be a reason in which we would close. The problem we're having is that the metrics we don't know necessarily how reliable they are, and that's what we're hearing from from Karen Brown from Northwest Community Hospital. Many of the families in some of our zip codes don't necessarily always have a primary healthcare provider, so we don't necessarily know how clean that data is. So it's largely going to be based on the governor. If we were to see a spike in cases in any particular area, like some communities like Lake Zurich have, that might cause us to pause. Or if once we did the rolling reopen and we were to see a spike in a surge or in a grade level, that would certainly be, a reason for us to determine if we were going to continue to onboard new grade levels, introduce new grade levels to the environment, or if we were going to keep everybody virtual or send everybody back. So it's nothing, clean. We don't have any clean metrics across the state, unfortunately, despite, I think, a lot of these public health providers' best efforts. But that is the plan that we are putting in place right now.
Lori, can you, I know you and I have had some conversations as to the why of having teachers teaching from their classrooms.
Sure.
Can you expand on that a little bit for the
Absolutely.
public and the rest of the board?
As everyone knows, last spring, everybody was home, and we were in an emergency, situation where we were literally putting Chromebooks in the hands of people, and we were in emergency mode. and people did the very best they could to find a spot in their house to teach from. But it was a challenge for teachers to say, we're expecting a lot. Our families are home, we have young children, but we still have students that we're responsible to teach. And we did the best we could at that moment in time to be as supportive as we could while still delivering on, our employment contract, to educate our children. Now we're in a time where this could be a short-term solution. It could be an entire year or any amount of time, in between. So local districts in our area that feed 211 and 214 feel strongly that we would like teachers to teach in the classroom where they have their resources. They have their Elmos, they have their document cameras, they have whiteboards, they have all of their physical resources. They have a dedicated space that's quiet, that allows them to stay focused, and they don't have the disruptions that our own children, pets, spouses, significant others, create when we're in a shared space. So we're trying to be very intentional to say that unless you have a medical accommodation, we would like you to come to school and teach. So we are offering, though, that said, we are offering a level of flexibility to say if you have these medical reasons or another reason, work with your principal, and we can provide some level of flexibility that might be a day or two where you can work from home. But if you do so, you need to make sure that that's a dedicated space where you can actually deliver a robust experience for children, because we're not in an emergency mode. This is, the start of the school year. So that is why our team, and certainly all the other elementary feeders that feed 211 and 214, and those are the ones I know of. I know many other districts outside our feeders are doing the same thing. Yeah. And our union, we've had a number of conversations, and they have, they've been, they understand what we're doing, and they appreciate the level of flexibility that we're trying to offer. So I think we found a just right balance.
Yeah, I think it's important to be said.
Agreed.
Because there's such a logical reason for it. That's not about people. It's not about trust. It's about providing great educational experience for students that are already going to be in a tough situation.
Yep.
We happen to have the benefit of tools. We have resources. We eliminate connectivity issues or bandwidth issues and the type of things that I know as a work from home employee for years and years and years on a day off of school. It used to kill me because every child in my neighborhood would come home and try to stream whatever on the internet or play video games, and I wouldn't be able to connect to my VPN from home. So, in what I do, okay, no, it's a hassle, but if I were a teacher and I had the education of 25 students on my plate that day, that would be very distressing, not only to the kids, myself, but their parents also. Sure. So that's an important one. I had one other.
Sure.
In general, the idea of teachers wearing masks in empty classrooms. Can somebody give a little bit of the why or the rationale?
It's the latest revision to the guidance from one of our I believe it's CDC. Is Karen still back there? I believe it's CDC. I can look, but it's guidance that we were told whether it's an empty classroom or not, and we don't understand the rhyme or reason. But we're doing everything that they've told us and more. So might that change? I don't know. So much of it has, but at this point, we're just following the guidance.
Any other questions? I have one quick comment that is specific to average class size targets. And if you guys can, anybody that knows more about this than I'd appreciate if you popped in. So when we talk about average class size targets here as a board, and Lori and the administration talks about that, those are some just general guidelines that are put out by the board and by administration. Typically on an annual basis, they're pretty consistent as far as from back in the board watching days to sitting on the board. For me, they've always been the same. Those guideline targets are basically kindergarten, an average number of 20, primary grades, which is that grades 1 to 3. That number, the average target is 24. Intermediate, grades 4 to 6, the average target number is 26. And junior high, 7th and 8th, that number is 28. So as we talk about numbers, know that in-person numbers are driven by a need to social distance and try to maintain the safety of our children. The at-home virtual numbers will try as best as we can to meet target numbers, knowing that there may be some plus or minus on that. I also know that it's out there, and I don't think anybody's hit it very directly, but there is a significant amount of dollar expenditure that's in the budget right now for additional staff, and I want to say that number is close to $2 million, which is a little bit of an eye popper. So for anybody out in the community that thinks that there's not an investment in doing the right thing, whether in person or virtual, to make sure that our staff is right, there's a lot of investment there. There's a lot of investment in doing the right thing to educate our children right now. And I know that there's a lot of work to find those dollars and to make this a year that's a good year, even in the most trying of times, which again is super appreciated by all of us.
Yep.
And as a parent also, that's something that I appreciate.
It's been a literal nonstop effort since March, but certainly from the end of the school year in May. Nonstop. Nights, weekends, at the risk of our own health and families and lack of vacation. Look at the team, we're all like, yeah, so thank you.
Can I just ask, as you talked about teachers being alone in the classroom, I'm just curious because we got a couple of emails about ventilation and so on. Is that one of the factors? I mean, parents are asking specifically about ventilation in the rooms to ensure, whether an air is recirculated, whether air is going, can anyone speak to that?
Sure, Jim. Do you want to come up? We have done a study with that. We had CO2. There are our engineers, our HVAC engineers come out. Sorry, just when you got comfortable, Diana, if you don't mind, just popping back, and Jim can sit over there. We've worked with our construction company, so Nicholas and Associates. They've worked with CO2 has come in, and we've done a study. Jim did put kind of a letter together about our HVAC system, and we've researched HEPA filters, and you name it, we've looked at it. Do you want to talk a little bit about that work that you did relative to our HVAC systems and the work with CO2?
So in regards to the filtering for the district, ASHRAE recommends, the highest rated filter that you can do that keeps the airflow from being minimized. So for us, it's going to be my reading glasses.
Sorry, Julie.
Yeah, so I don't have my reading glasses on me, so I wasn't
Then
planning
go
on.
off the cuff. I just thought I could help you with
So
something.
I'll just go off of what we're doing.
I don't have mine either.
We're putting in the highest rated MERV filter that we can, that goes along with the equipment that we have in the buildings. And so that way we can keep the airflow up to the cubic feet per minute that ASHRAE requires, as well as not damaging the equipment.
So ASHRAE, just so you know, is kind of the organization that HVAC, just like AASA is my lead organization, or ISBE is Diana and Josh's. ASHRAE is the HVAC
Regulatory agency that oversees
like airflow
recommendations for that industry.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure everybody knew.
Was there any more? Is there any questions in regards to what I just said?
I think one of the things you can talk about that we've talked about is, everybody hears HEPA filters, right? And everyone's crazy about HEPA filters, right? So the benefit and the downside to a HEPA with our building systems, I think, is a big question. And
Well, the HEPA filters, the head loss or the resistance that goes across that is too great for our equipment. So a lot of the equipment will end up being a MERV rating 13 and under. And again, it will be based on the equipment that we have in the building. The newer equipment, air handlers can handle the higher MERV rating filters. And then as we go down to the new vertical univents that we put in can handle the higher MERV rating filters. But then when you get into the horizontal univents, that'll be a lower rated MERV rating. And then the heat pumps would be even a little bit lower yet, because the equipment can only handle so much resistance head loss across the filter pressure difference, that that's going to dictate what we can and put into our equipment.
So these filters were put in place because of COVID, or they had to be put in anyway?
Yeah, so the district does a switch out. I'm new. Most districts do 3 times a year. We'll do 3 times a year, would be a standard. Obviously, we're going to up that, and then I'm putting together right now the cost difference for that for Diana to be presented. There will be an increase in cost with the additional switch outs and the type of filtering that we're upping across the board to its maximum levels also have an increase.
So we're planning to change, I'm so sorry, I'm trying to follow you. So we're planning to change the filtering system to.
We're changing as we're speaking right now.
Okay.
It's being done and will be done for the start of the school year.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the parents that are listening and hearing you out, what would you recommend, or what would you say to those parents in regards to the ventilation system once their students are in the building?
As far as
like
safety,
yeah,
the enhancements.
Yeah, I mean,
should they be worried about the ventilation system in our schools? I think is what you're asking, Wendy.
right,
Yes.
correct.
when you look at it's kind of a dangerous game to leave your lane of expertise. Yes, we're doing the maximum we can with HVAC equipment, but there's other higher risks than the HVAC equipment as far as a parent. As if I have 2 kids, I'd be more worried about some of the other things that have been talked about earlier this evening than the HVAC equipment. But we will do the maximum that we can with that HVAC equipment, and that does give a higher level of mitigation. But it's not elimination, it would be a mitigation.
And I can add, if you'd like, to the website, just something that I had Jim put together for me, so I could, I actually spent several weekends on the Asher website as well to learn about HVAC, something I never thought I would need to know about as a superintendent. Jim did put something together for me, and I can add it to the website, so this information is out. And then with our newer systems, I know somebody did FOIA, the system at Lincoln, which is a newer system. So that potentially has a different, higher than a MERV 13, right? Because it's a newer system.
No, MERV 13.
And at Willow Bend also because it's a lateral, not a horizontal, or it's a vertical, not a horizontal system. So some of our newer systems are a little bit different, which is also, part of what we can put on the website. Right. Elaborate on any of that with Willow Bend or Lincoln, because I know you were part of that FOIA.
Well, MERV 13 would be the highest before you end up into going to a HEPA filter.
So HEPA filter is higher rating or lower rating than this MERV 13?
I'm
so sorry.
HEPA filter is going to be a higher level of filtration.
Okay.
But it's a capacity issue, Wenda.
It's what the motors can bear, right?
Yes,
Jim?
what the motors can bear, what level of suction, the how much particulate, even airflow through a HEPA filter versus particulate through. So if it puts strain or stress on the univents or on the machinery, then we potentially have failure of our ventilation systems.
That's correct.
Which would be the exact opposite of what we never want to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Plus you want the highest turnover rate of air anyway.
Right.
That's a safety factor in its own right.
Thank you. All right. Any more questions? No? Okay.
Anybody? All right.
Number 5.
Great, so tonight is the final board action to issue life safety bonds. As you recall, the board a few months ago approved the life safety approvals. You had a public hearing last month. A few weeks ago, or maybe even last week, I have to.
We all blend together.
Yes, I have to give huge credit to Dr. Heinz, Diana, and Josh for putting together a fantastic rating presentation to Moody's to reaffirm the district's bond rating, which is AA2. The very highest rating is AAA, then comes AA1, then AA2. Being in the AA category is very important in Illinois, where the rating is so much lower based on our state. So the feedback from Moody's was that the district is really at the top of the AA2 category. Very strong results, maintaining fund balance, and we endured probably an hour of questions, then reviewed their report back to us in great detail, and I'm sure you'll be able to see that either on the website or we can send that out so you can review exactly what they said. But really, at the top of the AA2 category, it was very strong. The only thing that held you back from going to the next level is keeping more of your cash in the bank. You have very strong fund balances. You're above where the Illinois State Board of Education would like fund balances to be. And so that was well received, but the next step requires saving more of your cash, which at this time I'm sure is difficult. So tonight we're at the parameters bond resolution step, and this approves the issuance of the 14,567,000 life safety approvals. They came back from the state Friday night late, so just in the nick of time. There was about 730,000 that was not approved, but because the district had a life safety approval of work that was done at Frank Whiteley and was able to approve a reimbursement resolution several years ago, we're able to recapture that 730 from that amendment, so you will get all the money towards these life safety projects. So that's the good news. So the parameters resolution authorizes the sale of the bonds within certain parameters, and those parameters are maximum repayment schedule of 9 years, maximum principal amount of $6 million, not to exceed $6 million a year, and a maximum coupon rate of 5%. And I would just emphasize that 5% coupon rate is not the interest rate on the bonds. Right now, we're estimating an all-in true interest cost on the bonds of around 1.85%. We are, in fact, at historically low tax-exempt interest rates. We have broken the record. Every week, rates keep going lower. And so we are now scheduled to sell the bonds next Tuesday, August 18th, and the final sale will be subject to the approval of the superintendent, Diana as CSBO, and the board president. And the final results, of course, must fit within the parameters set forth in the resolution. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions you have. And I know it's a big, long document, but I would be happy to answer any questions regarding that.
You got the easiest seat tonight.
I do, and I just have to say I'm so impressed with your plans, Return to Learn. It's an amazing accomplishment in this environment. I'm in total awe of all of you, so anyway, thank you.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, so we're jumping back to 4.3.
4.3, Dr. Kowalczyk, do you want to come up? So while Claire's coming up, we will be doing a first and second read of two policies, 4.180, Pandemic Preparedness Management and Recovery, and 7.190 as they link to the Return to Learn plan and this upcoming school year. Take it away.
Good evening, everyone. So the board policy 4:180, the changes to that policy from the press was, instead of, earlier this spring, they had a pandemic preparedness policy that came out. Now they've added the management and recovery portion to the title of that. And then after speaking with our law firm, HLERC, we wanted to have explicit language in that policy about the mandated face mask wearing in our school. So the verbiage that we added to that policy came directly from our law firm. And then we, in that language, we also reference policy number 7:190, which is our student behavior board policy. And then we wanted to add that same language into that policy so that if we had to take disciplinary action with a student for not following our mask wearing policy, that we'd have that, or mask wearing practices, that we'd have that in board policy in both places.
This will also then be referenced, both of these policies, within revisions that we're making to the student and parent handbook.
And then in our administrative procedures, after the board approves our policies, then we amend our administrative procedures.
So you, on page 506 of 4:180, you see in red what HLERC is recommending.
So just a real quick question on it. This is going to be general in nature, so God forbid this ever happens again, we can institute this policy right off the bat with regard to the masks.
Right.
Okay.
And typically, as many of you on the board know, you keep your board language a little more vague, or just kind of piggybacking on that and taking a slightly different twist. You would do something that wasn't quite as specific to a mask, but for where we are right now, and since we don't know the duration of time, we wanted to put it, to add a little teeth to it in terms of enforcement, because it is a real strong point in terms of how our staff feels about kids wearing masks unless they have a medical exemption, and the same with visitors and other members of the building. So we felt strongly about it. We wanted to layer that in as almost to provide a little comfort and relief, so we put it into policy.
I think it makes a ton of sense to me to specifically call out masks at this point, because if not, there are so many wiggle arounds and caveats. We want to make sure that our staff feels comfortable and that when we say people are going to wear masks, they're going to wear them.
Right.
And there's something behind it.
Because if they're not comfortable, it's going to be very hard for them to deliver that quality education that we need for the kids. Correct. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, just really quickly reading through this. Do we, and I know HLERC took a look at this already, do we want to put students and anyone else in the building? Because I think the language that we're referencing here is strictly to students. And maybe I'm missing something in reading it, but I don't think it references anybody else.
No, I think you're right, Michael. I see what you're saying. And Mike, in that first paragraph, this was going to go into the handbook, so second sentence, and then anywhere where it just says students. It's a good grab. It can be staff, visitors. Help me think of who else. It could be anybody that's working within the building, so contractors. I'm sorry, I was having a word retrieval.
Yeah. And I think you might be able to just leave it to including but not limited to those people.
Even better.
Yeah.
Spoken like
It's
a lawyer.
Including.
I gotta make it specific enough to be general enough, right?
I do know in the handbook already, we added the visitor portion, like any visitor in the school building is required to wear a mask.
So included but not limited to students must wear. Yes?
Yes, students, students, visitors, staff.
Yeah, students, staff, visitors, volunteers, contractors.
Third-party contractors.
So you just have to amend that.
Yeah, you
So
said
it
to
gets
put,
to how you want it written, or
I got it.
Mary. You have it?
Yeah.
All right, and then typically we do not, as you know, do a first and a second read in one board meeting, but because we would like to have this approved by you, if you're comfortable before school begins, we're asking you to do that at the same time.
Yep.
We will not make that a habit, if we can help it.
That's fine.
Is that good? Any other comments, Dr. Kwalchuk, or? No?
No, we had even asked the law firm, like, should we include it in our like student appearance or any other places, and the law firm was very confident if we just if we added to this pandemic preparedness that we were fine. But then we did want to reference it also in student behavior, just so we had that cross-reference.
Anything for 4.4, we put public comment in here because we knew it was around. You know, we had it at the beginning, but then we also spelled it out here if anybody had, you know, comment. We don't have to, people can always comment on a topic, but we explicitly put it here if anybody were here and wanted to make a comment.
I don't see anybody
Are we still having a virtual option for public comment?
We have, since we're back kind of in business, we are not. We're going back to our typical practice. We did that while we were in an earlier stage and we had a smaller gathering number. And when this was under construction, but we did not intend to, no.
I think that it was driven by the number being 10 or less.
Yeah,
Right.
that makes sense.
So it was,
And we had this set up with socially distanced 34 seats. We had an overflow area in the auditorium that, you know, we could rotate people in and out of. As you know, my staff was outside to allow maximum, you know, seating to the public. So we had a plan to have more than 35 that could address the board. We were just going to use 2 locations and move people in and out.
Perfect. I just want to make sure that we name that
No,
for
it's a good
people
question.
for next meeting if they do want to say something.
And then the last thing in this section, 4.5, you know, is a resolution that some of the school districts are using in terms of having their boards of education, you know, sign on the dotted line, if you will, you know, about the return to learn plans. And there's a number of things, and it's piggybacked with the policy number to really talk through and hit section number 4. I'll start with, if it's okay. Modification to policies and procedure. The board hereby suspends any board policies and administrative procedures in conflict with the foregoing plan, and delegation of authority delegates to the superintendent the authority to suspend or revise administrative procedures and district protocols in conflict with the plan. We've called out the 2 big ones. We updated the pandemic and student discipline, but if there were any other board policies that we didn't formally update to align with the plan, the 2 that we did being the largest 2, we would be covered in terms of, we would never want to be in violation of a written board policy. So that's why section 4 is so critical, and why we chose to bring the 2 most highly recommended policies forward, that we made those changes to. So then I'll go back, if it's okay, just to section 1. I'll kind of talk you through these. They're fairly self-explanatory, even though they're written in legalese. We can look to Michael and Zubair if we need anything translated into non-lawyer English. Section 1, Return to Learn. The board has reviewed the Return to Learn plan and discussed its proposed content, and we hope, you know, we'll adopt this plan at the end of, you know, this segment of the meeting. Section 2, Schedule for implementation of the Return to Learn plan. The board has reviewed the superintendent's proposed schedule, which the 2020-21 school year would commence, and hereby approves that schedule. So that's the rolling portion, starting remote, and the rolling portion of opening school. Section 3, Delegation of authority. The board delegates to the superintendent the discretion, and then there's 5 areas. Authorized to approve, implement, interpret the foregoing plan and determine the means and method for operating the schools and delivering instruction pursuant to such plan, and any subsequent revisions or amendments thereto in accordance with applicable state, federal law and regulations, and in compliance with local, state, and federal guidance to the extent reasonably practicable. 2, periodically review and amend the plan, and we've done that from the July to August meeting, and I did share with the board that I would intend to bring any updates to subsequent meetings. So we just have a kind of a constant item on the agenda where we'll be talking about the plan and how things are going and any changes that we've made. And that's part of school code, section 1030 of the school code. Implement the proposed schedule for implementation of the plan with the authority to revise such schedule as deemed appropriate. Prepare administrative procedures, and we will do that, as Dr. Kowalczyk said, to the 2 plans that we talked, the 2 press policies that we brought forth today, and delegate responsibility, discretion, and authority as needed to accomplish the same. We've talked about 4. 5 is enforcement. The board and superintendent are hereby authorized to enforce compliance for the foregoing plan and administrative procedures for student, staff, and visitors pursuant to the general and specific provisions and processes of all applicable board policies, administrative procedures, and law. Number 6 is something that I've talked a little bit with, number 7 is the one I've talked with Frank about, or via email. closure of buildings for educational purposes and to the public. 6 and 7 have to do with really limiting outside use of the facility during this pandemic period. So we just have, to the extent that we think we should, just our employees and students, and we're going to limit visitors to the extent that we can. So due to the possibility of COVID-19 exposure in district facilities or resurgence of the pandemic during the 2020-21 school year, the superintendent is authorized, after consultation with the board president and notification to the board, to suspend in-person learning, to close any school buildings or district's facilities or portions thereof or bus routes without further action by the board, either pursuant to the plan approved in this resolution, the directive of the governor or the state superintendent of education, or the directive of recommendation of public health authorities, or at the discretion of the superintendent in consultation with public health authority. Such closure shall continue under such time as the superintendent, in consultation with appropriate local, state, and federal health and governmental authorities, determines that it is the best interest of the district and its students to open school for in-person learning and or to open school buildings or district facilities. Upon making such determination, the superintendent shall promptly notify the board, and as soon as practicable thereafter, shall present the district's plan for reopening for approval by the board at a duly noticed board meeting, which may be either a regular meeting or a special meeting. 7 has to do with community use. In order to effectuate the order of the governor and other local, state, and federal guidance regarding social distancing, gathering, and restrictions on all but essential activities, the board hereby delegates to the superintendent the authority to restrict facility usage under policy 8:20, community use of school facilities, and to require third parties using school facilities to comply with applicable public health guidances. The board delegates to the superintendent the authority to allow use of district facilities as deemed necessary, as appropriate, to cooperate with the Illinois Emergency Management Agency and other local, state, and federal government entities, community service agencies, hospitals, or community support or relief efforts related to COVID-19. Section 8 has to do with the duration. The provision of this resolution will apply during the period of disaster proclamation currently in effect, or any subsequent public health disaster declarations related to COVID-19 or related or successor viruses that is effective for part or all of the school district, and for a reasonable time thereafter, as may be necessary to restore normal operations following the end of the disaster proclamation, but in any event, no later than June 30th, 2021, except as that date may be extended by action of the board. And lastly, Section 9 has to do with execution of this resolution. This resolution may be signed in counterparts or on successive dates following its adoption. Any signature line in this resolution not signed manually by the board president and board secretary may be signed electronically or deemed to be signed through email or other electronic communication with the same force and effect as the original executed signed document, which this is the first, to the Illinois Electronic Commerce Security Act. So we're going to do it live. So I wanted to just have a discussion about these sections. Does anything seem like we'd like to discuss, that we need clarity, that we have concerns about? This was certainly, recommended by HLERC just to make sure that the board was aware and involved and received information about the plan. And as we did in July, took general consensus in terms of how to operationalize the plan and which options we should move forward to, further investigate and develop.
I mean, just to understand the point of the whole thing, a lot of the things that it's delegating for authority seems to already be with you.
Mm-hmm.
This is just, it almost seems like we've decided to change a couple of board policies, and the attorneys are basically telling us that, well, and just in case there aren't any other policies down the road that we're not thinking of right now, instead of going through each policy and making the edits now.
That's number 4, section 4. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean.
Enforcement, closure of the educational, I think number 6 is critical, because should we need to close, we wouldn't want to have to convene an emergency board meeting to do so. I think that's why 6 is pretty significant. Enforcement, it authorizes us to do what we need to do relative to the administrative procedures. 7, I think it just puts out there an awareness that we're not going to use, to allow folks to use the board policy under 820 to use our facilities, because we really want to restrict access to our buildings to only those people that have to be there. So the duration and it just clarifies that this is in effect until we're in phase 4 or until the end of June. So, I think a lot of this is just some level of legal protection. Tort indemnification is certainly built in there, for the administrators operationalizing this plan for the board, for the district. I think that that's important. And I think the other thing that it does is it kind of unites us in terms of our efforts around this return to learn plan, on behalf of the community's elected officials, as well as the superintendent, in which you've hired, and my team, that I've hired. So that's kind of the long and short of when I talked with Heather Brickman at HLERC, as to why many districts were doing a resolution. And that kind of came my way from in between the July meeting and this meeting.
I mean, is it your understanding? I honestly don't know the answer to this. Is of, like when we had closed the schools in the spring, it didn't really require the board to have a vote on it. It was an emergency that had to be done.
Right, that was the governor, shut us down.
Yeah, I mean that's.
Well, we were planning to do it already, weren't we?
Well, I made the decision to shut down because he didn't, and then the next day, he did, because so many districts made the decision.
So I think Zubair's point is that we weren't planning to take a vote to act to close schools, that you were able to do that on your own.
Yes.
So this is just formalizing the fact that you've been able to do that on your own this whole time, is how I'm under.
Right.
Okay.
And because we're not in an emergency.
Right. Okay.
I mean, there are still many elements of, like an emergency with COVID, but we're not closing,
Sure. And I think the other part of it is approving, like in section 6, saying that, are we formally approving these plans, like the plan that you presented today, of return to school? Is that something that requires the board to? No, I mean it's something that we've done as a measure of consultation and consultation with the public, which is a good idea, but it's not really, I think, required.
No, other than the tort, immunity component, that would be, I think important coverage for the district that the resolution provides.
Yeah, I don't have. I mean, me personally, I don't have a problem with it.
Pardon?
I don't have a problem with it personally. I just trying to understand its purpose. So.
My question was on section 4. If we are suspending any board policies, that we could be notified, that the board, in the same way that you did with the others, but I just want to make sure that if there are changes to policies, that we are at least informed.
Ask. I don't know that we will. I don't intend to.
Yeah.
But I haven't combed through all of them to know that there weren't any others that we would need to. The 2 that we brought forth were those recommended by HLERC. Obviously, the pandemic makes sense, and then the discipline because of the requirement of face coverings.
Yep.
Were the 2, and then we'll do another tier. We'll link those revised policies to the handbook that we're actually just doing an overhaul on right now, not as part of COVID.
Okay.
Not part of COVID. And then it would be Lisa and Sam that would sign off on this as the president and as the board and as the secretary.
For the school calendar.
Okay.
Calendar, yeah. Is Lisa still here?
Okay, let's see, what's next? So, it looks like the school calendar, hold on, let me find it here.
So we're at 5.2, school calendar.
Uh-huh. Just looking for it here, so what is that, 8, or 4 rather? Help me.
There's
5.2, I just need to find it.
It's probably in there.
Here it is, okay. So, all right, so what you have before you is there are 2 state e-learning days that replace 2 student attendance days, and the addition of the teacher plan day. So I talked with you about those days, but that is what's reflected in this calendar. The state, just like when we went into an emergency closure in the spring, they gave teachers 5 days to plan if they needed to use up to the 5 e-learning days. We're taking 2, so we've adjusted the start of the school year as I shared with you earlier, and then we did the swap out for the November 3rd teacher plan because we're not allowed to have anybody in school. And I think it just wound up being just perfect that we had to get rid of it, because I really do think that teachers, 2 institute days, 2 days of rich e-learning professional development, and then they're going to have a day to just plan. and do whatever they need to do to feel ready to open the school year. So it kind of, those 5 days are nicely aligned now, and that is why you have a proposed calendar change here in the packet to reflect those days.
And the June 4th end date is inclusive of 5 snow days or weather days.
Right. We don't have to make up those days with the e-learning days, so this should, and who knows if we'll ever use a snow day again, because now that we're getting so good at e-learning, we may never have to take another snow day or cold weather day.
Oh, that's kind of sad.
We'll see, I said maybe, we'll see.
Let's kids.
Let's not talk about that now, I have enough on my mind, that'll be the next thing people are talking about on Facebook.
I could do a throwback.
I know. A
Throwback
vintage
snow
snow
day.
day.
Throwback, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that is what 5.2 is. Any questions?
No.
Okay, perfect.
All right, may I have a motion for the reading and accepting of minutes, please?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the following meetings of the Board of Education, June 10th, 2020, special regular Board of Education meeting and executive session, and July 7th, 2020, special committee of the whole meeting as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.1, as read, Frank?
Okay, so it seems to be the hottest topic is the tort immunity, which has to do with the fact that most insurance, general liability insurance for Illinois schools exclude pandemic and viruses. So that's I guess that'd be a big concern that we have. I don't know how much you've talked to our legal team about that, but there has been discussion with the state legislature to see if they can do something to kind of close that hole, because what would happen is that the schools could be liable for the defending any claims and paying any awards that may come out of those court cases, and the insurance companies would not cover any of that. So the one possible fix is that they would extend the immunity for COVID-19 related claims, and then the other thing would be if they were to pass legislation that would actually make the insurance companies required to remove that virus exclusion. So those are two possible fixes. Theoretically, the Illinois Tort Reform Act should cover the schools as long as the schools don't do anything that is egregious and neglectful with regards to protecting the students. But you could still get sued and then go through this long process, which could take years and could drain resources, only to find out then that you're not really liable because of the Illinois Tort Reform Act. But again, that would still cost money and time and effort. So
There are some districts across the state that are wondering, they're so concerned that they don't know if they should even open.
right.
You're right,
So that's something that they're pushing to have the Illinois legislature take a look at and see if they can plug that hole so that
That'd be great.
schools are more inclined to be able to open as opposed to just being closed because they're afraid to open.
Yeah, so currently under the Tort Reform Act, administrators and school personnel, unless they have egregious mistakes or egregious conduct, are immune from lawsuits. Right? Is that
Right.
the current state of it?
The pandemic component is a different element, which is why resolutions are being suggested. It's an added layer of protection.
Yeah, and even though you're right that would help defend them against the cases, they still could have the cases brought against them and still would have to go through all the cost of the lawyers and the time and the effort.
Yeah, there's no duty to defend.
They could still, they'd still win because of the Illinois Tort Reform Act, but they could still have to go through all the expenditure and time and resources.
Stress.
Yeah.
Stress. Your head immediately went there, huh?
Hasn't ever left since March. I think that's the big one too.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I'm done.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good, Mike, 1-5 Foundation?
No report at this time?
Nothing, great. Anthony, 1-5.
May I quickly just say something about the 1-5?
You may.
Super fast. they adopted GMS, it was gonna be the first school that we were gonna do like a combined, flexible learning space. So that's kind of like the Cadillac where that space has a variety of different little, virtual learning or flexible learning vignettes, if you will, that the 1-5 will continue to do fundraising around for the next 3 to 5 years until hopefully all of our schools have those spaces. And GMS looks great. Carpet has been painted, the furniture's starting to come in. Sadly, no one's gonna be there right at the beginning of the year, but at some point, everyone, the kids, the teachers, and staff will really enjoy that space. So I just wanted to let you know that we're closing in on having GMS done. We'll take some pictures and we'll show you some pictures at the next board meeting. Okay, sorry, Mike.
Nope, you're good.
No worries. Finance Committee.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
We have not met, but one thought that I have, in between now and the final budget in September, would you like us to schedule? I would recommend, and
Yes.
Josh and Diana are new, but I would recommend that we have a meeting with the Board Finance Committee and move through that, final development, okay? So I'll reach out, or Julie, if you could reach out with the three of us, find a date, see, Wenda and Anthony, and then we'll get something on the books between now and before the meeting.
Great.
Next meeting.
All right. Equity Committee, Zubair, Sam?
I,
Can
yes.
we schedule a meeting?
We do need to schedule a meeting. That was gonna be my point too. I am also gonna join Tom and his team that's envisioning our gifted program.
Great.
And so that's a piece of thinking about, as we were looking at the opportunity gaps that exist across the district, which feels like that presentation was 5 years ago now, was just a few months ago. And making sure that our gifted program is actually representative of the student population that we
So we'll
have.
schedule a meeting, and then if, I would also like to suggest that you and I have a meeting with the consultant that we're using, Laura Bolchenko. So we'll try to schedule 2 meetings, okay, Julie?
Cool.
So if you could let Julie know when some days and times that are best for you, I'll reach out to Laura and we'll schedule 2 meetings.
Great.
And I think I've been in on some of the meetings on the curriculum, social studies
Yeah.
curriculum, dealing with the equality and how we're teaching African American history and civil rights history. That's something that I've sat on. I have to kind of join in with where they are at right now in terms of those actions. And I think also the SEL component that it's a lot more SEL going on. Some of that is also going to have a focus on some of these equity issues and things like that. That's going to be incorporated into the SEL component of what's out there. So that there was also committees that were in on that as well.
So I think social studies meeting, the SEL, I think what's happening in 211 in terms of
Mhm.
students, that student activism, I think we can kind of layer some of their work into the work that we're doing.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll kind of
Yeah, so maybe it just makes sense we can set up a meeting.
set up an all-day meeting, like we can retreat. There are a lot of things to do. But
I would love that. That sounds like fun.
Have a meeting, we can put these things on the agenda and then take it from there.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know the other piece that we had talked about starting sort of pre-COVID was developing an equity statement for the district as well and getting that process started once we are in the swing of school.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Action items. Item 8.1, a motion, please.
Make a motion to approve the August 11th, 2020 personnel report as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Could you hold on for 1 second?
Yes.
You just remembered of the August addendum. They just added all the personnel.
You've all
As
received
amended.
the 8.1 amended
Mhm.
addendum.
Good point. You want to motion with the
With the
personnel
addendum from
report
August 11th.
inclusive of the addendum as presented?
Oh, yeah, let's make a motion, let me go back. Make a motion to approve the, personnel report inclusive of 8.1 revision, right? As presented.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Andrew,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 8.2, motion please.
I make a motion to approve the resolution of the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 15 approving the fall 2020-21 revised school return to learning plan as presented.
Second. Discussion? Roll call?
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Anarino.
Aye.
Motion carries. Sorry, Frank. I don't know, everyone's getting a little tired.
It's late.
Item 8.3.
I make a motion to approve the resolution of the Board of Education of CCSD 15, Cook County, Illinois, authorizing an interfund transfer as presented.
Second. Discussion? Roll call?
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Anarino,
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye. Motion carries. Item 8.4, motion please.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed $14,565,000 in general obligation limited tax school bonds of the district for the purpose of altering and reconstructing school buildings and purchasing and installing equipment therein for fire prevention, safety, energy conservation, and school security purposes, providing for the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal and interest on said bonds, and authorizing the proposed sale of said bonds to purchaser thereof as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Anarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 8.5, motion please.
I make a motion to ratify the bid award and execution of a trade contract with AMS Mechanical Systems, Woodridge, Illinois. The amount of $1,799,000 for the 2020 boiler replacement work and assignment of the contract to Nicholas and Associates, Inc. as construction manager pursuant to an assignment of contractor agreement as set forth in the board's contract with Nicholas and Associates, Inc. Further motion to ratify and approve project authorization exhibit number 3 with Nicholas and Associates, Inc. to provide construction management services for the 2020 boiler replacement work as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Anarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 8.6.
I make a motion to award the contract for non-commodity food products 21-001 to Cole Wholesale of Quincy, Illinois in the amount of $547,891.08. Gordon Food Service of Grand Rapids, Michigan in the amount of $179,321.02. And Performance Food Service of Montgomery, Illinois in the amount of $39,188.25 for a total bid award of $766,400.35 as presented.
Second. Discussion? Roll call?
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Anarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye. Motion carries. Item 8.7, motion please.
I make a motion to award the contract for USDA Commodity Food Products 21-002 to JTM Food Group, Harrison, Ohio, in the amount of $13,842.90. Land O'Lakes, Arden Hill, Minnesota, in the amount of $42,247.11. Performance Food Service, Montgomery, Illinois, in the amount of $33,407.90. Cole Wholesale, Quincy, Illinois, in the amount of $406,495.25. And Gordon Food Service, Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the amount of $76,858.10 for a total bid award of $572,800. $851.26 as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Ader,
Aye.
Andorino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 8.8, motion please.
Make a motion to approve the purchase of second step social emotional learning SEL kits and licenses for grades K through 6 at a total cost of $145,009.80 as recommended.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Andorino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 8.9.
Make a motion to approve the purchase of American Reading Company 100 Book Challenge Spanish book baskets at a total cost of the curriculum and materials of $86,880 as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Andorino.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 8.10.
I make a motion to approve the purchase of the Alex Math Program 4th and 5th grade add-on at a total cost of resources for the 5-year term of the contract of $121,490 as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Andorino,
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 8.11.
May I ask you to pause on that for a minute?
Yeah.
Colleen Mullins, who oversees reading or literacy in district, has been texting with me. Can I step up for just a moment? You can
Yeah.
proceed with these items.
Please do.
I just leave faster. Just call her.
All right, moving on. 8.11, motion please.
I make a motion to.
Wait,
I think
8.12.
she wanted to do 8.12.
Oh.
Skip 8.11.
Skip it,
Skip.
yeah.
I thought it was
Got
an
it.
excuse me, can I step out? Sure, we'll keep
Right,
going.
that's what I thought,
All right.
see?
We're
Sorry.
moving to 8.12.
Okay, we'll go to.
Skip it.
All right, I'll take that one.
Skip
then.
it.
Lori
Make a
would have been in for a
motion-
nice surprise.
Make a motion to approve the 2020-2021 revised official school calendar as presented.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Andorino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 8.13.
I make a motion to approve the purchase of the Go Guardian Suite content filtering, remote classroom management, and school mental health tools at a total cost of $38,920 as recommended.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Andorino,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye. Motion carries. Item 8.11.
Okay, so the motion that you have before you is making a motion to buy additional Fontes and Pinnell readers notebooks that we use on a regular basis for not to exceed $60,000. Colleen was texting to say she had written something, but it doesn't see it in here. And we just finished sectioning everything today and doing special area sectionings and getting everybody where we need to go. We have additional sections that we have to open at each grade level because we have lower numbers in lower class sizes in person, and then we have the virtual classrooms. So she would like either to do a combined 8.11, or maybe we separate them out and do 8.11, and then we can do a new 8.14 to say a not to exceed amount of $80,000 to buy additional Fontes and Pinnell materials to support our increased sections that we've had to create because of where we are with.
Okay, so we're adding a
With
motion to add 8.14.
You can combine
Basic.
8.11 or you can add 8.14. It's up to you. You tell us.
And 8.14 is going
Are we not
is
exceeding?
an additional 80,000, or it's
Yeah.
adding 20 to the?
It's an additional 80. Good question. So the reader's notebooks were an expense that we know we needed to have for the reader's notebooks.
So we're either changing that one to not to exceed 140,000?
Right, and instead of saying reader's notebooks, it could say Fontes and Pinnell reading materials.
Okay.
That's actually clean.
Yeah.
Makes it easier.
So reading materials, and then adjust the number from
Not to exceed.
60,000 to not to exceed 140,000.
Okay, perfect. That's great.
Somebody
And
got
I
that?
apologize, but
Yep.
I'm glad we caught it. So we can
Frank,
get,
you wanna take
if
it?
you approve it, get the
Sure.
materials. Right.
You were.
I make a
jumping on it
motion,
before, so.
I make a motion to approve the request to purchase Fontes and Pinnell reading materials not to exceed $140,000 as recommended.
Second.
Further discussion? Roll call?
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Iannarino,
Aye.
Hunt, Khan.
Aye.
Motion carries. Consent calendar, would anyone like to remove anything from the consent calendar? If not, a motion, please.
Yeah, yeah.
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Roll call?
Ader,
Aye.
Iannarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Motion carries. Dr. Hines, correspondence?
I have to even see, I don't recall, I know we had some.
We had 4.
3 or 4, I was gonna say, I didn't remember the number. Freedom of Information Act requests, we've given you copies of them, do you have any questions? No? Okay, wonderful.
Okay. Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.